Let that summer sun shine. Always stay humble and kind. Don't take for granted the love. Always. I am a real American. Fight for the rights of every man. I am a real American. Fight for what's right. Fight for your life. When it comes crashing down and it hurts inside,
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Senator Jim Banks.
Good morning, and thank you all for being here at the 4th Annual Northeast Indiana Defense Summit. It's an honor to have all of you here to help kick off what would be a very significant day for all of us as we talk about the national defense industry in Indiana, and especially right here at home in Northeast Indiana. Yesterday, we had a great kickoff day. How many of you were there with us last night with the Secretary of the Navy? Thank you all for being a part of that. We had the honor of awarding a Hoosier combat veteran his long overdue Purple Heart. And what a great way to celebrate Veterans Day, to do that, to give back to one of our heroes for what he's given us. We heard from the head of the Indiana National Guard, and also had a conversation about how Indiana leads on hypersonic weapons. It was a great discussion downtown at the Pearl Center and over at the Bradley Hotel. First of all, I want to thank, if you all would please join me in thanking Purdue Fort Wayne for hosting us today. We appreciate this very much. We have a very action-packed day ahead of us. We will hear from the 79th Secretary of the United States Navy, John Phelan. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for being here with us. Please give him a round of applause. The Chief Technology Officer of Palantir and one of the leading voices for reviving the American Defense Industrial Base, Shyam Sankar, is here with us today. We're going to hear from him. One of our nation's leading investors in defense technology, Thomas Tull, is going to join us for a discussion. We have defense tech innovators and industry leaders from all over Indiana, from Silicon Valley and around the country, who have come to the heartland of America, Fort Wayne, Indiana, to be a part of this great day. And we're going to kick it off here in a moment with my friend, the great Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth. How about that? What a great way to kick off this great day. I'm really excited about this. It's not in my notes to do this, but I want to thank all of the members of Team Banks. They make me look good. They do all of the hard work. I just show up and read a speech. But they're the ones: David Keller, my Chief of Staff; Tanner Spencer, my State Director; Chris Crabtree, so many others; Adam Lemon and Jeremy Hayes, my defense guys in Washington; Jessica. I'm missing a bunch of their names, but ladies and gentlemen, we have the best team in the business, and they don't serve me, they serve Indiana, and they do it better than anybody. So thank you, Team Banks, for all of your hard work and for what you did to make today possible. Please thank them. I want to be brief because I want to hear from the Secretary, and nobody ever said, I wish the Senator would have talked a little bit longer than what he did. It's never happened. President Trump is rebuilding and remaking the United States military into the world's strongest fighting force. And Secretary of War Hegseth is leading the effort daily to achieve peace through strength, I think in ways that we've never seen before. Thanks to these two leaders, we are confronting China, securing the border, rearming our military, and building a made-in-America economy. The America First policy means that we want America to be the most prosperous and secure country in the world, and that average working-class Americans share in that prosperity. Within 6 months, Congress has delivered on this promise with the One Big Beautiful Bill that has $150 billion in new defense spending that includes $25 billion for the Golden Dome, $29 billion for shipbuilding, and $23 billion to resupply munitions and strengthen our supply chain. Between defense reconciliation and the funding for Indiana in the NDAA, we are going to play a huge part in the modernization and rebuilding of America's military. Whether it's satellites, hypersonics, sonobuoys, or aircraft engines, Indiana is the leader in so many areas that support our military, and Indiana's role and significance is only going to grow stronger in the years to come. Secretary Hegseth is the right person for the job at the right time. He has turned around recruiting and retention in the military after a disaster over the last 4 years. He's fixing defense acquisition, and he recognizes how important Indiana is, and I'm really honored that he would come all the way to Fort Wayne, Indiana to be a part of this event today. I want to talk about Indiana and the defense industrial base for a moment. Indiana is home to some of the brightest minds working in national security. We have top engineering schools and industry-leading hypersonic hubs at places like Crane. Where's Phil Smith and all the guys from Crane? Thank you for what you do. At Purdue, yeah, thank Crane is the crown jewel of our state. Purdue and Notre Dame are leading on this hypersonics front. I'm really proud to support the work that they're doing as well. Indiana has some of the most high-quality and high-tech manufacturing jobs anywhere in the country. L3Harris is making satellites for the Space Force right here in Fort Wayne. Ultra Maritime makes most of the sonobuoys for our naval forces in the Pacific, in my hometown, Columbia City, just down the road. Rolls-Royce alone employs 3,500 Hoosiers and has invested over $1 billion in the past decade in its plants in Indianapolis and elsewhere. In West Lafayette, Purdue grads are launching amazing new defense startups just off campus. In Burns Harbor, workers forge the steel plates that are vital for our Navy's ships. In southern Indiana, BWXT helps make the naval nuclear reactors that go in our submarines and our aircraft carriers. And we have the best kept secret of the Navy down at Naval Surface Warfare Center, Crane. Crane has never been more important than what it is today, both for our state and for our national defense. It is the third largest Navy base in the world. And I tell people, I brag about that all the time. Indiana's a Navy state. It employs nearly 2,000 Hoosiers and has had more than a $3.5 billion economic impact on this great state. Submarine-launched weapons, hypersonics, electronic warfare, secure chips, and munitions are just some of the critical capabilities that Crane works on every day. The Westgate complex outside of Crane is growing by leaps and bounds. Just this year, Westgate broke ground on 2 large buildings for hypersonics, with several more groundbreakings soon to come. In Bloomfield, we're going to build one of the largest solid rocket motor complexes in the country with the Munitions Campus program, where 16 different defense companies are currently looking at building, and I think there'll be a lot more to come. Look, this is the 4th annual Defense Summit, but my first time hosting it as your United States Senator, before serving 8 years in the House of Representatives and the first member of Congress ever from this district to serve on the House Armed Services Committee, and now I serve on the Senate Armed Services Committee. And my number one priority, my top priority, is our nation's security. Our first order of business on that committee, I'm very proud of. The first thing that I got to do in the United States Senate on the Armed Services Committee was to confirm our great Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth. Our next order of business was to help President Trump pass the One Big Beautiful Bill, which included critical wins for our nation's defense and for Indiana. As I already said, $7.2 billion for military space-based sensors under the Golden Dome program, significantly boosting the deployment of hypersonic tracking satellites such as those built today, L3Harris. $400 million to accelerate the MACH-TB hypersonics testing program, and over $500 million for secure DoD microelectronics, heavily tied to Crane, who is a leader in both of those areas. $2 billion for development of nuclear sea-launched cruise missiles. Much of the development and testing for this new cruise missile will happen at Crane. That's all a part of what we fought for and got into this year's NDAA. $80 million for sonobuoys, critical for anti-submarine warfare, and more than half of that is going to be made in Columbia City. $310 million to accelerate the future long-range assault aircraft with engines that are made in Indianapolis. The NDAA requires the Pentagon to report back to us how it can move ship component production from the coast to the Midwest. I was proud to fight for these wins and make sure the Indiana Defense Industrial Base, the Defense Industrial Base continues to build cutting-edge weapons for our warfighters now and into the future. I want to get to what we're all looking forward to today, and that's to our Secretary of War. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth has been the exact leader the military needed to restore the focus of lethality after 4 disastrous years under the previous administration. Under his leadership, Secretary Hegseth has ended wokeness and DEI in the military and brought back the warrior ethos. Nothing could be more important than that, and in a short period of time, that's what the Secretary of War has done. He's turned around the military's worst recruitment crisis since the creation of an all-volunteer force. It has been an astonishing success story. This year, the military services far exceeded their goals for new recruits and more troops than ever because these men and women decided they wanted to serve our country and were inspired to do that by our Commander-in-Chief and our Secretary of War. Secretary Hegseth made game-changing reforms to defense acquisition, some of which he announced last week and he's going to talk about today. He has worked tirelessly to ensure that America's military meets the challenges of tomorrow, and our enemies have been put on full notice of his leadership and how powerful and mighty the United States military has become on his watch. Ladies and gentlemen, it is an incredible honor as a kid who came from Columbia City, Indiana, right next door to Fort Wayne, to introduce my friend, the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, to Fort Wayne, Indiana. Please join me in welcoming a great friend.
Well, Senator, thank you very much. You are very kind. I appreciate it. It's a pleasure to be here. Much rather spend a morning in Indiana than a morning in Washington, for sure. Although I could do without the snow as a Minnesota boy. First time I've seen it this season. But thank you. Thank you for being an ally. Thank you for being a voice of sanity. Thank you for being principled yet pragmatic. Looking down the dais of the Senate Armed Services Committee when we get to you and to those seated next to you. Not that I don't love everybody on the Senate Armed Services Committee. Of course we do. I appreciate the clear-eyed view you take of the world and the support you have for President Trump and America First. It's clear, and from day one, so thank you very much. It's also, you mentioned the confirmation process, which as you know, went down to a 50-50 vote in the Senate. My kids were there with me. He just reminded me of that. And they went out, Mark Wayne Mullen, another member of the Senate Armed Services Committee, took my kids out to the forum to watch the vote. And they came back in after the vice president came with his motorcade and broke the tie. And I said, kids, what do you think about, we did it. We broke the tie. He goes, no, Dad, you didn't break the tie. You won in overtime. I kind of like that framing better from the kiddos. So thank you for what all of you do. I know there's so many folks here in industry that support the efforts here in Indiana and across the country. And it's a reminder of the importance of the defense industrial base to the heartland and the importance of the heartland to the defense industrial base. I'm here today to talk a little bit of specifics, but even more broadly about the priorities of President Trump, the Department of War. It happens to be 1 year ago today that President Trump announced my name as his choice for then the Secretary of Defense. 1 year, barely believe it. I'll never forget walking out of his office on the second floor of Mar-a-Lago, or walking in the middle of it where he said two things. He said, first of all, Pete, you're gonna have to be tough as shit. Proved to be true. He also said, I need you to bring the warrior spirit back to the military. We need the warrior spirit back. And that has been our guidepost, as the senator mentioned, from the beginning. I mean, I could lay out the 10 points, and it's been America first, peace through strength, common sense, revive the warrior ethos, rebuild the military, reestablish deterrence. We're going to defend the homeland. We're going to deter China. We're going to make sure our allies do their part in burden sharing, and we're going to revive the defense industrial base. That's 10 points, general overview of what the president prescribed us to do, what the Department of War has been focused on, and the urgent threats that we need to orient on. That's the overview of what a golden age of American warfighting looks like. Now, our top priority, as the president has charted the course, is America first. Go on to the days of nation building or deferring to globalist organizations. Everything we do is America first. And so if America first is our founding principle, then peace through strength is our tried and true playbook. And President Trump understands this like no president since Teddy Roosevelt. The motto of my first platoon, and I think there's value, the senator himself served in Afghanistan, led men. There's value to our generation of troops now having an opportunity to lead. I never thought I'd put the motto of my first platoon to good use. But 1st Platoon, Charlie Company, 2nd of the 113th, New Jersey National Guard, Guantanamo Bay, 2004 to 2005. Our motto was, those who long for peace must prepare for war. And our logo was actually a giant peace sign in barbed wire. Warriors have repeated that motto since the 4th century Rome, including George Washington, the first leader of our War Department. And that's why we restored the name of the Department of Defense to the Department of War for clarity, not because we want war, but because we must be fully prepared to wage it. And since waging war is so costly, we owe our republic a military that can win any war we fight. And our adversaries have to believe that we're capable and willing to fight and win that war, which is what leads to actual deterrence. That's peace through strength. Should our enemies choose to challenge us, they will be crushed by the violence and the precision of the War Department. These are not academic and theoretical concepts. They have to be real. It has to be real hard power, and the enemy has to believe you'll use it in order to prevent them from taking action. And certainly it's not theoretical right now. This feels like a 1939 type moment, or hopefully a 1981 type moment, where America needs to lead and rebuild to ensure that we maintain that peace through strength. Enemies are gathering and threats are growing. We have to prepare now. So if you're putting America first and the roadmap is peace through strength, the third ingredient President Trump has injected is good old-fashioned Indiana common sense. Common sense is back at the White House and it's back at the Pentagon. Common sense means putting warfighting, lethality, as the senator mentioned, training, discipline, accountability, readiness at the forefront of everything we do at the Department of War. That means no more social justice, no more political correctness, no more toxic ideological garbage that infected the department. As I've said before, but we repeat and we repeat because as a good old television host, you know it takes a while for it to actually sink in. No more identity months, no more DEI offices, no more dudes in dresses. No more climate change. It actually was a thing. It actually was a thing. No more climate change worship, no more division, no more delusions, gender delusions or quotas, no more distraction. As the chairman of the Joint Chiefs puts it, Pete, you're clearing out the debris. That's what it is. We're clearing out the debris from out front of NCOs and officers. We're done with that stuff. It doesn't take a PhD to understand that sergeants don't need sensitivity training. But we're taking the next step. We're not just undoing damage, we're solidifying the way forward. We're taking concrete steps to ensure that common sense reigns going forward. We're restoring a ruthless, dispassionate, and common sense application of standards. I introduced a golden rule test in a speech I gave at Quantico to a number of generals and senior enlisted. It is, do unto your formations that which you would have done unto your sons. Would you put your son or your daughter into the type of formation you are creating? It's a very clarifying rule. So I don't want my son serving alongside troops who are fat and out of shape, or in combat units with females who can't meet the same combat arms physical standards as men in their units. Standards must be uniform, gender neutral, and high. It's simple. It's colorblind, gender neutral, merit-based. I say colorblind, gender neutral, merit-based. That's what the military should be. Because if they're not standards, then they're just suggestions. Suggestions that get our sons and daughters killed in combat. And that's why I've directed every service to ensure that every requirement and every combat MOS returns to the highest male standard only. One standard across those combat jobs. If females make it, fantastic. Then they're most qualified for that position. If not, then so be it. It's not about what gender makes it into what position. It's are the standards meet the duty and the position, because a body on a battlefield or a .155 round weighs the same whether you're a man or a woman. So in line with POTUS's common sense agenda, the first item of what we're undertaking inside the Department of War is restoring the warrior ethos. So a lot of what I just said falls into the category of restoring the warrior ethos. And it's up and down the ranks. As I mentioned, that speech at Quantico, whether you're an airborne ranger or a chairborne ranger, a brand new private or a 4-star general in the Pentagon, you need to meet height and weight standards and pass a PT test twice a year. I also said, we don't need to be in a military of beardos anymore. Do you know how many troops claim to be Nordic pagan? No, suddenly it's become like this real fake religious affiliation inside the Pentagon where troops claim to be Nordic pagan so they can grow a beard, and no one challenges them on it because no one's upheld standards for a long time. So now a quarter of the platoon is sporting beards because they're now suddenly Nordic pagans. We're not doing that stuff anymore. The idea is, it's sort of the broken windows theory of policing. There'll be some people that say, well, Pete, why would a secretary care about beards and PT standards? It's the same thing, well, why would a mayor of New York care about squeegee men or about broken windows? It's because when you let the small things go, you create a climate of criminality. But when you let the small things go inside your formations, you create a climate of a lack of discipline, where standards cannot be enforced. And if you can't enforce them on the small things, it gets far more difficult to enforce them on even more meaningful things. And so when commanders and NCOs are not empowered to enforce discipline and standards, instead they're called toxic. Now the entire command structure is flipped upside down. And what happens when directives have to be given in combat, when bullets are flying, when you need directives to be clear and you need them to be followed. That's why those things in peacetime matter and they become a reflex in wartime. We're also ending what has become a risk-averse culture. NCOs and commanders no longer have to walk on eggshells, that's the phrase that we've used, for fear of compromising a blemish-free record. You see, blemish-free records are great in peacetime, but they don't work in wartime. So we're overhauling the Inspector General, the EO, and MEO processes so they cannot be weaponized. See, these processes have been weaponized to put complainers, ideologues, and underperformers in the driver's seat. I spent a year writing a book called The War on Warriors before I took this job, where I spent Saturday afternoons at Fox calling members of the military, every rank, every background, every service, asking them what works, what doesn't, what's going wrong in the military. And time again, they came back to command climate. It's impossible to be a commander right now because the minute you enforce a standard, you're called toxic and someone drops an IG complaint on you and you can't get promoted, you can't move on, and you're not empowered to enforce standards. We're changing that entire paradigm. We're reviewing and flipping the entire IG process. Sure, you still can't be racist or sexist. Like, it's been illegal to be racist in the military since 1948. Those things remain and those things are clear. But officers simply upholding high standards that promote the warrior culture are not toxic. And we're no longer are going to be subjected to drawn out, weaponized, unfair investigations that are never, anonymous complaints that go on for months and they can't do their job. There's a big difference between something that's anonymous and something that's carefully handled or close hold. confidential. And we've worked with the services, with the joint staff across OSW to put in place a process that ensures that you can approach the IG if necessary, but commanders are empowered throughout. So that's restoring the warrior ethos. Number 2 is rebuilding the military. Our warriors, I mean, as the president points out, and he's right, we have the strongest, most capable, most lethal military in the world, full stop. No one can touch us. But if we're gonna maintain that and put the best weapons, ships, and aircrafts and platforms in the hands of our men and women, we've got a lot of work to do here in Indiana and across the country to get things on time and at scale. So when I think of rebuilding the military, we think of places like NSA Crane. Right here in Indiana, the 3rd largest naval installation in the world. I can't lie. I mean, the first time I met with Senator Banks and he told me about Crane, I said, wait, the 3rd largest naval institution in the world is in Indiana? Okay. But then when you add it all up and you look at the industry and you look at the history, it all makes sense. And then you look at the capability of what's produced here. Crane embodies the warrior ethos, committed to unwavering dedication and readiness in the face of any challenge. Over time, it's become a go-to, as he mentioned, on drone warfare and hypersonics and microelectronics, rapidly transitioning these innovations to the warfighter. We're gonna need more places like Crane, and we're gonna need them quickly. To achieve the historic rebuilding that President Trump has mandated us to undertake, we have to liberate our bureaucracy and fundamentally change the way we do acquisitions. Seated over here is Mike Duffy. He's the head of A&S, Acquisitions and Sustainment at the Department of War. And from the beginning, he and I have worked together. He and his team have taken the lead in saying, how do we fundamentally transform how we acquire and buy and develop weapon systems? And it manifests in a speech on Friday of last week at Fort McNair, where I spoke to military officers, defense industry executives, members of Congress, and others to announce those reforms. It's been a long time coming, actually. The last time there was a major acquisitions reform effort was Secretary Rumsfeld, and he announced it on September 10th of 2001. Needless to say, many of those reform efforts were overtaken by the events that happened the very next day on 9/11. We're continuing in that lineage, undertaking a department-wide transformation of requirements, acquisitions, and foreign military sales. We're addressing a core function of what we do at the War Department, identifying what our warfighters need, how we buy those capabilities, and then how we share those capabilities with allies and partners, which in a contested world is becoming even more important. You know this. I don't have to tell you this. For far too long, our department's been bogged down by burdensome and inefficient processes, paralyzed by impossible risk thresholds and requirements, and distracted by agendas that have nothing to do with warfighting. And every dollar squandered on redundancy, bureaucracy, and waste is a dollar that could be used for something meaningful. So the objective is quite simple: transform the entire acquisition system to operate at a wartime or warp speed footing, to rapidly accelerate the fielding of capabilities and focus on results. The objective is rebuilding the arsenal of freedom. Rebuilding the arsenal of freedom. American industry and its innovative spirit are begging to be unleashed to solve our most complex and dangerous warfighting problems. By the way, this task of transformation will be a war of attrition. The Pentagon's gonna fight back, the bureaucracy's gonna fight back, the powerful primes will fight back, and it's our job every hour, every day, every week, every month, with our team, to return fire, overwhelming fire, and say, no, this is how we're changing the paradigm. We're opening the aperture on speed, on competition, on scale, on commercial first, because the warfighters need it, and they need it now. Industry needs to perceive business with the Department of War from a perspective of growth and assume risk to partner with the United States. We're talking about transformation, not toothless reform, and we're talking about it fast. Because our adversaries are not sitting idly by, and their ambitions and intentions are clear. Now is the time. Here are the 5 overarching transformative pillars for our procurement process. First, we have to stabilize demand signals. We will award companies bigger, longer contracts for proven systems so those companies can be confident in investing more to grow the industrial base that supplies our weapons systems more and faster. And that's good for big guys, small guys, and everything in between. More, faster. Second, we will prioritize the purchase of industry-driven solutions, commercial solutions that meet our need to be faster, even if it doesn't meet every requirement. It means that we're open to buying the 85% solution and iterate together to achieve the 100% solution, because an 85% solution tomorrow is a lot better than a 100% solution that is never in the hands of a warfighter. It also means there will be no non-compliant bids. Third, we will empower our program leaders with the control, expertise, and authority to direct program outcomes, move money, and quickly adjust the priority of required system performance to deliver on time and under budget. Fourth, we will inject urgency and excellence into the defense industrial base. We're only going to do business with industry partners that share our priority on speed and volume above all else, who are willing to surge American-made manufacturing at the speed of ingenuity to deliver rapidly and reliably for our warfighters. And then fifth, we're undertaking regulatory reform, removing excessive and burdensome FAR and DFARS rules, reporting requirements, accounting standards, excessive testing oversight, and excessively long studies and analysis. Some of the things that used to take us 3 to 8 years through requirements and acquisitions now should take under a year. And we're talking budget cycle speed. Anything that unnecessarily slows down government contracts will be eliminated. So the bottom line is these changes will move us from a current prime contractor-dominated system defined by limited competition, vendor lock, cost-plus contracts, stressed budgets, and frustrating protests, always a protest, to a future powered by dynamic vendor space that accelerates production by combining investment at a commercial pace with a uniquely American ability to scale quickly. We're going to rebuild our defense industrial base into a new arsenal of freedom, which I know is welcome news to everyone in this room. We're committed to becoming a better customer and empowering firms that are ready to take risks, deliver on time, and innovate. So you've got the warrior ethos, rebuilding the military, and finally, of the 3 internal reforms at our department, reestablishing deterrence. You all know for far too long, especially under the Biden administration, the military looked woke and weak, and it invited aggression on the world stage. Under the Biden administration, our adversaries expanded in Eastern Europe, in Ukraine, in the Middle East, in what happened on October 7th, in Southeast Asia, and Central and South America. The debacle in Afghanistan set the stage for a lot of it. By the way, I'm getting an update again next week from our Afghan task force, looking into what happened there, and we will be releasing that in 2026. Our enemy knew that they could get away with these things because Biden was feckless. The department looked feckless and was. But under President Trump, deterrence is back. After decades of securing other people's borders halfway across the world, we're finally securing our own border in our own hemisphere. An invasion of over 20 million people from around the world with no idea who they are is a serious and dramatic national security threat. That's why we're happy to support mass deportations as well of our friends in federal law enforcement. But we've also surged our posture to the southern border from minute one to lock that border down. Our goal is 100% operational control of the southern border, and every passing day we get that much closer. Cartels, trafficking, and death, all of it across the border ends. In fact, for the past 5 months, as I hope you've heard, there have been 0 crossings across our southern border. We know who's coming in. Let me tell you, the morale of the troops down there, I've gone down there a number of times to meet with the troops, to be defending our own homeland, securing our own border in a real world context with real authorities to do so, partnering with Border Patrol and Mexican Border Patrol on the other side is motivating. Our men and women down there love what they're doing, and that's why we revived the 1918 Mexican Border Medal to pin on their chest when they're done with a 6-month tour down there securing the border. These are not guys, with binoculars who don't have actual authorities. These are, striker platoons with vehicles and optics able to come alongside Border Patrol and assist in arrest of those coming across our border and lock it down. And eventually, more funding will lead to more infrastructure, more border wall, which will require less of a footprint, but even the same amount of a lockdown. We're also taking the fight on the deterrence front to cartels. My advice to foreign terrorist organizations is do not get in a boat. I mean, if you're trafficking drugs to poison the American people, and we know you're from a designated terrorist organization, you're a foreign terrorist and a trafficker, we will find you and we will kill you. No one is better. No one is better at tracking and networking and mapping and hunting than the American military. Honing those skills for many decades in foreign lands. Now we're doing it in defense of the American people with all the authorities. We got lawyers on lawyers. All the authorities necessary to do so, treating these terrorists like the Al-Qaeda of the Western Hemisphere. And we're seeing in real time that they're changing their methods and will adapt as they change those methods. But again, another signal of deterrence, locking down the border, taking on the cartels and stopping the poisoning of the American people. A great example as well is Operation Midnight Hammer. What our B-2 pilots did over 37 hours, going all the way from Missouri and back, going into Iranian airspace with, there were 52 refuelers, there were fighters in front of them, all the maintainers, incredible Americans who maintained the entire thing. But to go into an adversary's country, drop 14 precision 30,000-pound bombs into holes the size of this podium, and then turn around and leave Iranian airspace, and there wasn't a single news article, tweet, or reaction from the Iranian government, gives you a sense of what the American military is capable of. No, it was one of my favorite moments when we're in the Situation Room and we realized the bombers are out of Iranian airspace and all the targets have been hit successfully, and the president realizes that he gets to announce it before the world finds out, and he just turned to his assistant, we're all there, he goes, "Get me my phone." And he went, boop, and the world knew. But imagine the power of the signal of that truth, of the fact that the president had said, Iran, you have 60 days. And then on the 60-day mark, bombs dropped on their facilities, destroying Fordow, Esfahan, and Natanz. 60 days to the day, bombs drop. America says we'll do something, we follow through. Iran, he's said from the beginning, Iran will not have a nuclear weapon. He gave them 60 days, they didn't comply. The B-2s took care of business. The world sees that America's word matters. Another example of that that's often forgotten is the Houthis. Since, I don't know, would it be Thomas Jefferson? Our ships have been able to sail at the high seas without us accepting interdiction or pirates or those ships being threatened. The idea that freedom of navigation, American freedom of navigation was sort of taken as a given. Until under the Biden administration, Houthis started shooting at our ships and, I don't know, we shot a few missiles into some huts, but didn't do anything about it, just accepted the fact that we can't sail there anymore. And when President Trump came into office, he said, no, we're gonna reestablish freedom of navigation. And so we dropped bombs on the Houthis for 45 days until they cried uncle, and now our ships sail wherever we want. That is a reestablishment of deterrence, that you do not tangle with the United States Navy or Air Force or our people. And if you do, you will get the vengeance of the United States military until we get our way and our ships sail freely. All of these things are reestablishments of deterrence that had to be done given the backsliding of what occurred during the Biden administration. Now, we're also reestablishing deterrence, as the senator mentioned, in the Indo-Pacific and around the world. We're supporting allies and partners out there as force multipliers to strengthen their own capabilities. In March, I took my first trip to the Indo-Pacific as secretary and the first trip to Guam in 20 years from a Secretary of Defense or Secretary of War. I traveled to the Philippines, to Korea, to Japan, to Singapore, to Vietnam, to Malaysia. We are deterring China's influence around the world, not to mention the Panama Canal, where we're freeing that canal from malign Chinese influence, ensuring that American ships can sail freely. We're also increasing the burden sharing of our allies. I think a huge signature of what the Trump administration, what President Trump's been able to do in his first term and the second term is reawakening NATO to their actual mission. You're not an alliance if you don't have capabilities. And if you're not willing to spend on your own militaries and you're dependent on the United States, you're not actually able to step up when an adversary threatens you. Yes, Ukraine was a wake-up call for Europe, but more significantly, it was President Trump saying, you need to pay up. It's not enough just a free ride on us. I mean, what happened in June from President Trump in NATO members committing to 5%, 3.5% of hard military spending and 1.5% in infrastructure is historic. If America's gonna have to take the primary burden of what happens in the Indo-Pacific and deterring China, then Europe needs to be prepared to step up in its own continent and ensure that forces like Russia or others are checked properly. It's common sense. You can't be everywhere. And finally, I'll end again kind of where we started with the defense industrial base. Decades of underinvestment and nonsensical bureaucracy and unstable demand signals have left us at a place where we're too reliant on too few, and what we do get is, yes, exquisite, but can't scale. We're just at a point where if we needed to rebuild, as we are right now, the arsenal of freedom, we have to make fundamental changes. So we're revitalizing American industry broadly, President Trump is, through his golden age, and at the Pentagon, we are ensuring that we maintain the most powerful military in the world. You can talk strategy all you want about homeland and hemisphere and deterring China and burden sharing. That's all briefs nicely on a white paper, but if you can't actually build the things you need to underwrite it, it's all an academic exercise. And that's why defense industrial base has been a top priority of ours from day one. So we're restoring the warrior ethos, we're rebuilding our military, we're reestablishing deterrence, and we have a president of the United States who has the backs of our warfighters. That's what I tell the troops every time I'm traveling. It's all I ever wanted as a young lieutenant was to know that my commander had my back. At any echelon, when we had to do difficult things in the dead of night, where you make decisions in a split second, you're not always gonna make the right decision. But if you're doing it for the right reasons on behalf of the troops and the mission, then your commander ought to have your back. You see that with law enforcement, you see that with Border Patrol, you see that with our troops. When you have a commander-in-chief and a leader with a steel spine who has their back, they're empowered to make communities secure and safe. They're empowered to secure the border. They're empowered to deport dangerous illegals, or they're empowered to close with and destroy the enemy. And that's why a lot of what I've done as well is untied the hands of combatant commanders and allowed them to make decisions at their level to deal with and hunt down enemies of the United States, many of which the American people don't hear about in the newspapers. But it ensures that our warfighters are able to go out and do what they need to do to keep all of you safe. So in this new era for the defense industrial base, we're gonna take risks, we're gonna optimize for speed, we're gonna compete, and we're gonna scale. For the firms used to the old way, who refuse to take risks and innovate, we wish them well in their future outside of the Pentagon. But to the rest of you, we look forward to partnering with you to supply our warfighters and rebuild our military. Washington can be a tricky place, but not when you know why you're there and what you were sent there to do, and you lock arms with people who share those same perspectives. President Trump sets the tone. My job, I've got two basic principles. Don't talk to the media unless you have to, because all they do is spin, spin, spin. And then just do your job. Just do the job you have. And the job I was given by President Trump is to be the Secretary of Defense and now the Secretary of War, to deliver on behalf of warfighters. That's it. There's no other games to be played in Washington, D.C. And so when you have allies, and you need allies in that effort, and I'll tell you what you have here in Indiana, in the good Senator Banks is an incredible ally, who we know we can call when tough decisions have to be made, or he has to stand there shoulder to shoulder with us, or help explain the reforms that we're undertaking, it's critical. And you learn real quick in Washington who your real friends are, who will actually go to bat, and whose core is grounded in what needs to be done in that moment to advance America first and peace through strength. So, Senator Banks, I want to thank you for being that ally to us at the Department of War. From day one, from the announcement to the confirmation to everything in between to the reforms that we're undertaking, you've been rock solid. And I want to thank you for that. So there's so many defense executives out here who make exquisite and important things that we utilize. Thank you for what you're doing. This ought to be a golden age for you as well. We want you to run, and we want you to run fast. We need you. We will be the most powerful force in the world 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 years from now because we have no other alternative. There's no one else to call. You've all been around the world and back, and so have I. It's only America, it's only our arsenal of freedom, it's only our military that's going to ensure that the 21st century is a free century and that peace is maintained for the American citizens. It's only us. Now's our time to step up, and I'm honored to do my small part. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, reconvene in a few minutes. Thank you.
So I'm Mark Lewis. I'm the president and CEO of the Purdue Applied Research Institute. And it's actually my privilege this morning to welcome you to the beautiful Purdue University campus at Fort Wayne on behalf of the entire Purdue University family. And I have no idea how I follow the Secretary of War, by the way. Thanks, guys. But I'm going to give it my best try. So I want to begin by thanking Senator Banks, not just for sponsoring this great event, but for his incredible support, and not just to Purdue and our sister institutions, but in fact the entire defense ecosystem in the state of Indiana. Those of us who understand the importance of defending our nation could not have a more dedicated, more effective advocate in Washington, D.C. than Senator Banks, so thank you. I also want to thank Senator Banks' staff. So the senator made the point that he has the best staff in Washington, D.C. I'm here to confirm that. You absolutely could not find a more professional, more accessible, more can-do office on Capitol Hill than the Senator Banks team. So, gentlemen and ladies, thank you so much for that as well. Secretary Hegseth, Secretary Whelan, my friend Undersecretary Duffy, welcome. We were honored to have you in Indiana today. And I also want to acknowledge another very important guest, the Honorable, and may I say amazing, Lisa Hirschman, with whom I had the privilege of serving in the Pentagon when she was the Chief Management Officer of the entire Department of Defense, and who now heads the State Office of Management and Budget. Lisa, thank you for your service to the state and to the nation. It's tremendously appreciated. Now, make no mistake, we are in a defense technology race with peer competitors, and I argue it is a race that we dare not lose. And we heard inspiring comments along those lines just a few minutes ago from the Secretary of War. So this morning, if you will indulge me for just a few minutes, I'm going to spend just a few minutes bragging about Purdue and how we've stepped up to this challenge. We are mission-aligned in national defense. We have made significant investments across the board in such areas as energetics, microelectronics, advanced manufacturing, nuclear power, and of course, hypersonics. But it's more than just the dollar investments. It's the dedication of our people. Our faculty and staff have a strong record of service to the nation. That includes our president, Mung Chiang, who served as a senior S&T advisor to the Secretary of State in the first Trump administration. And more recently, Professor Joe Jewell. He's the nominee to the Assistant Secretary of War for Science Technology. That will make him the senior-most scientist in the Pentagon. Joe's a renowned hypersonics expert. He's a Rhodes Scholar. You couldn't imagine a more qualified individual for that role. Joe, thanks for stepping up to that role. And Joe's going to be working alongside Indiana's very own, the Honorable Mike Dodd, who's the Assistant Secretary of War for Critical Technologies in the Office of the Undersecretary of War for Research and Engineering. But there's more. Engineering Dean Armin Rahman at Purdue is now the nominee to lead the National Institute for Standards Technology, and he'll be dual-hatted as the Undersecretary of Commerce. And the head of our Purdue Research Foundation, Chad Pittman, is also Colonel Chad Pittman, serving in the U.S. Army Reserve, and he's helping train allies around the world. But beyond just the faculty and staff, it's ultimately about the students. Now, at Purdue, we produce more engineering grads than any other school in the nation, and they are amazing. And they're focused on national defense. We have one of the largest ROTC programs in the country. We run the Defense Civilian Training Corps. It's like a civilian ROTC program. We have the Purdue Military Research Institute, where we get active duty military into our graduate programs, working in our labs, working on our research activities. We have extensive partnerships with Navy Crane. Phil Smith, you're in the audience somewhere. Phil's made that all happen. We work with Space Force, many other departments, Department of War components. And we have tremendous relationships with the defense industry, from the large primes to the small businesses to the non-traditionals, many of whom are in the audience and many of whom has significant footprints in Indiana. Unlike some universities, we pride ourselves in welcoming our national security friends to our campuses. When you visit, and I hope you will all visit, because we have a lot to show off, you will not be met with protests. You'll be met with open arms, probably coffee and donuts as well. So, my message to you, it's not just Purdue. As some of you heard yesterday, we are linked hand in glove with our sister institutions across the state. That includes Notre Dame, Ivy Tech, Indiana University. Together, we are greater than our sum. We bring STEM and skilled workforce to the defense industrial base. Let me be bold. I would argue the entire state of Indiana educational system is here to support our nation's defense. We are not ivory tower academicians. Instead, we're committed to taking invention out of the laboratory and delivering real capability into the hands of our warfighters in a timely manner. And we look forward to partnering with colleagues across the state frankly, across the nation to make that happen. So thank you. Please enjoy the rest of this amazing summit and have a great rest of the day.
Well, thank you very much, Mark. And again, thank you to Purdue University, Purdue Fort Wayne, for hosting us in this great facility. We appreciate it very much. I'm so excited about today. A couple of years ago, we had the Secretary of the Air Force join us, and I thought, how will I ever top that? I think we've topped it today, right? And I know I'm biased, but you top the Secretary of the Air Force by having the Secretary of the Navy. I mean, come on, right? Who we're going to hear from in a moment. I'm so excited about this event and what it means and what comes out of it, the conversations, the networking, the relationships, the ideas. I could tell you many stories of over the last 4 years about connections that have come out of this room that have led to more investment and opportunities for Indiana, and that's what this event is all about, and I'm very proud of it. I'm honored to introduce one of our special guests at the Northeast Indiana Defense Summit, a man who's been entrusted with a big and giant task by the President of the United States, and someone else who has become a really good friend of mine. I'm really proud of what I get to do on the Armed Services Committee in confirming President Trump's nominees to all of these important offices at the Pentagon. And I put the confirmation of our Secretary of the Navy right at the top of the list with Secretary Hegseth because of how important of a job and a role that he has. The Honorable John Phelan was sworn in as the 79th Secretary of the Navy on March 25th. As SecNav, Secretary Phelan oversees the well-being, readiness, and development of nearly 1 million sailors, Marines, reservists, and civilian personnel in the Department of the Navy. Prior to his appointment by President Trump, Secretary Phelan was the founder and chairman of Rugger Management, a private investment firm based in Palm Beach, Florida. I appreciate someone who spends much of his life in Palm Beach coming to a chilly Fort Wayne, Indiana, so we appreciate you making that sacrifice for us. Before launching Rugger, he was a co-founder and co-managing partner of MSD Capital, a private investment firm. He is a committed patriot and philanthropist. Secretary Phelan served as chairman of the board of trustees of the Third Option Foundation, the Spirit of America, and as a member of the Business Executives for National Security. I can't imagine what an honor of his lifetime it is to go from being so successful in business now to serve his country in this very important role as Secretary of the Navy for the greatest president of my lifetime. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Secretary of the Navy, John Phelan, to the stage. We're very honored to have you in Fort Wayne.
She tried to pretend he wasn't drinking again, but Daddy left the proof on her cheek. I was only 8 years old that summer.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you for the kind introduction, Senator Banks, and for putting this wonderful forum together. Secretary Hegseth, thank you for your leadership, and Governor Braun, thank you for hosting us here in the Hoosier State, and Congressman Stutzman, thank you as well. To state and local leaders, service members, veterans, industry and business partners, thank you for being here. It's good to be in Indiana, home to Naval Surface Warfare Center Crane, one of the Navy's most important engine rooms, as we like to call it. And I'm okay with the cold, even though I'm from Florida and grew up there. It's good to get back to the cold every once in a while. It kind of thickens your blood. So this state pairs a deep bench of skilled trades and engineers with a central logistics hub, turning precision machining and process reliability into competitive advantage. America's Navy doesn't start at sea. It starts here, where you make things and where capacity, speed, and repeatable quality convert requirements into deterrence. But for this relationship to work at the speed the current environment demands, we have to be clear about what we are trying to do. The Navy cannot afford to be isolated from its suppliers who keep the fleet moving. We have to communicate our needs, our timelines, our strategic direction of travel with precision and clarity. Industry should not have to guess what problems we are trying to solve, nor should they be mired in the valley of procurement death that occurs in the Pentagon. So let me say this plainly. The United States Navy is open for business. We are signaling demand, publishing requirements earlier, compressing decision cycles, and breaking down the barriers that have kept good ideas and capable suppliers on the sidelines. If you can help us deliver warfighting advantages, capacity, speed, resiliency, we want you at the table. We are rebuilding the fleet because the threat environment demands it. We are living through one of the most dangerous strategic environments in modern history. Warfare is being reshaped in real time by drones, AI, autonomy, machine learning, and rapid iteration. A time where warfighters, coders, and manufacturers adapt capabilities mid-fight and in some cases mid-day to change the enemy's calculus. The ability to adapt and iterate is no longer a competitive edge. It's a key determinant of victory. We face a world characterized by China's unprecedented military buildup and the direct threat it poses to the United States and our allies. A more vulnerable homeland after years of unsecured borders and increasingly capable air and missile threats, and the persistent dangers of Russia, Iran, North Korea, transnational cartels, and globally sponsored terrorist organizations. This is a world that demands a combat-credible naval force, ready to fight and ready to win, anytime, anywhere, against any adversary. For 250 years, the Navy Marine Corps team has protected America's interest, delivered sea control and power projection, kept sea lanes open, and ensured our prosperity. This has been a busy year for our Navy Marine Corps team, from Operation Midnight Hammer, when an Ohio-class submarine from hundreds of miles away put multiple Tomahawk missiles precisely on target, degrading Iran's nuclear capability with devastating effect, to the Red Sea, where our ships have stood watch against multiple drone and missile attacks across 380 separate engagements to keep sea lanes open and commerce moving. And recently, in Operations Atlantic and Pacific Watch, the Department of Navy has seized more than 450 metric tons of cocaine worth more than $11 billion. Those seizures aren't just numbers. They are lives saved and communities spared. This is what readiness looks like. Sea lanes open, allies reassured, enemies deterred, and the American people and our way of life protected. In every century and in every conflict, control of the seas has been the decisive factor. Today is no different, and America's sailors and Marines are proving it every day. However, our status as the world's dominant sea power is increasingly being contested, and it is no longer guaranteed. This did not happen overnight. These problems have been building for more than 2 decades. A systemic degradation of our industrial and shipbuilding capacity. Our manufacturing base today is roughly 1/3 the size it was 3 decades ago. Workforce constraints are stretching build schedules. Our shipbuilding enterprise has eroded, hollowing out capacity we must have to deter war. Nearly every ship class in the Navy is behind in construction. 58 of 59 ships are significantly delayed, many by more than 2 years, all with major cost overruns. We face significant surface and submarine maintenance backlogs as well. We have too many single and sole source vendors. Public shipyards in America have fallen from 8 to 4, and private surface shipyards have fallen from 14 to 7. This isn't a temporary setback. This is a readiness problem. It is a systemic problem that has eroded the very capacity we rely on to deter war, and it is one President Trump has correctly identified and we are now addressing. Commercially, the picture is just as stark. The United States produces less than 1% of the world's commercial ships. China's dual-use shipyards hold over 50% of global market share and about 95% of container production. With 44.6% of U.S. international goods trade by value and 78.6% by weight moving over the seas, too much of that commerce is underwriting Beijing's capacity. That is unacceptable. On the workforce side, we've allowed skilled trades to atrophy. In the Cold War, about 35% of Americans worked in manufacturing. Today, it's around 12%. Roughly 70% of our industrial workforce, the pipe fitters, welders, ship fitters, and structural fabricators, will retire in the next decade. To meet demand in new construction and repair across public shipyards alone, just those four, we estimate we'll need 250,000 new skilled workers. I believe for the last decade, we've taught people how to code. For the next decade, I believe teaching people how to use their hands will be the most relevant skill needed in the workplace. For too long, our shipbuilding enterprise has been slowed by red tape, supply chain fragility, and a shrinking workforce. We let efficiency become an excuse for fragility and complexity become an excuse for delay. That era is ending. Under President Trump's leadership and his One Big Beautiful Bill and his executive order on restoring America's maritime dominance, he armed us with the authorities, resources, and urgency to modernize the fleet, expand our shipyards, rebuild the skilled workforce, deepen our magazines, and harden the infrastructure that wins war at sea. That strategy is being shaped by the Secretary of War, who has taken the defense acquisition system that was slow, fragmented, and built for another era and transformed it into the warfighting acquisition system. This new system concentrates authority, aligns incentives to speed, and cuts through the layers that added delay but no value, because acquisition is now recognized as a warfighting function. And speed to capability is the organizing principle for the entire Department of War. Together, these reforms restore the foundations of maritime strength and position us to deliver the fleet our nation needs at the pace the world now demands. Because whoever controls the seas controls the future, and America must always be that nation. We're overhauling shipbuilding from the inside out by modernizing dry docks, streamlining contracts, and insisting on accountability from every tier of the supply chain. We are moving away from cumbersome contracting toward deliberate, predictable procurement so builders can plan, hire, and deliver with confidence. We are also driving convergence between commercial and naval shipbuilding, co-building and co-producing where it makes sense, sharing tools, talents, and timelines. That redundancy and resiliency is essential to a fragile base. So what's changed inside the Department of the Navy? We are taking smarter and better calculated risks. We are learning to iterate in real time. And we are grounding our reforms in the playbook of the innovators who came before us, leaders like Admiral Wayne Meyer and General Victor Krulak. These were men who refused to believe that tomorrow's security could be purchased with yesterday's thinking. Admiral Wayne Meyer looked at the accelerating threat of jets, precision missiles, and electronic warfare, and understood that legacy defenses would not save future ships. He integrated radars, interceptors, and computing power into Aegis and reshaped naval warfare forever. General Victor Krulak, who traveled to Washington in 1939 with detailed evidence of Japanese amphibious craft, found his report buried in a drawer, stamped with a Post-it that said, "The work of some nut in China." His analysis proved prophetic, and his persistence helped drive the creation of the Higgins boat, the workhorse of Allied landings from from Guadalcanal to Normandy. Innovation often looks impractical, strange, even foolish, or like the work of some nut in China, right up until the moment it becomes indispensable. These leaders pushed, they iterated in real time, they refused to take no for an answer. Different eras, same lesson. The future belongs to leaders that take risk, move fast, and refuse to accept that's how we've always done it as the final word. It is my goal, my priority, and frankly, my obligation to ensure that yesterday's lessons forge tomorrow's maritime superiority. If I leave anything behind, my hope as Secretary of Navy will be a Navy that is stronger, more capable, and more adaptable than the one I inherited. A Navy that wins anywhere, anytime, 24/7, 365. To make this a reality, over the last several months, we have restructured how we buy, build, and field capability. We established a new group to place smart bets on breakthrough technologies and speed up capabilities, helping us move from operational problems to deployable solutions faster. We also created a new unified unmanned and autonomy group led by a 3-star admiral, a deputy assistant secretary, and a portfolio acquisition executive for robotic and autonomous systems to drive requirements, acquisition, and delivery under one accountable architecture. The mission is simple: accelerate integration of unmanned systems across the fleet and ensure they interoperate seamlessly with manned platforms. My view is simple: human and machine together will outperform human or machine alone. We are organizing the department to capture that advantage. We've also put our weight behind the maritime industrial base, increasing throughput, compressing design timelines, and accelerating maintenance and modernization cycles. This is not a pilot or a study. This is execution. Faster contracting decisions, better design and modular build, tighter operator feedback loops, and early industry involvement so production problems are identified early and projects start on schedule and stay on track. Shipbuilding and readiness remain the department's and MI's top priorities. We are driving shipbuilding initiatives to increase tonnage, strengthen allied production lines, and attack the long-standing choke points that have dragged our enterprise behind the power curve. We're strengthening our shipyards across the country, but also the thousands of suppliers in states like Indiana who make the parts, forge the steel, and design the systems that keep the fleet alive. Every weld, every bolt, every circuit board built here contributes to sailors and Marine safety halfway around the world. Our focus is readiness. Readiness begins with ships that work, crews that are trained, and an industrial base that can sustain both. That's why we're investing in America's manufacturing at every level, from microelectronics to advanced propulsion, from additive manufacturing to new alloys that can withstand the harshest ocean environments. The Navy's modernization effort isn't just about ships. It's about ensuring that when conflict comes, and history tells us it always does, we are ready on day one, not day 30 or day 60 or day 90. That's where manufacturing powerhouses like Indiana come in. You're the quiet giants of America's defense industrial base. Your machine shops, foundries, and innovation hubs produce the materials and components that make our submarines silent, our ships survivable, and our sailors and Marines unstoppable. This state turns university pipelines and veteran talent into high-tech power systems and mission components at scale. Indiana isn't just America's crossroads. It's one of our key engine rooms, and nowhere is that clearer than Naval Surface Warfare Center Crane. 100 square miles, the third largest naval installation by area, and a critical strategic center for the Department of Navy. Crane drives expeditionary warfare, electronic warfare, hypersonics, and advanced sensing. It's a crown jewel for microelectronics and trusted hardware, and a crucial pillar of the Navy's leg of the nuclear triad through life cycle support of Ohio and our new Columbia-class SSBNs. But rebuilding isn't just about machines, it's about people. And the Department of the Navy needs partners like all of you, industry leaders, educators, and state and local officials who help us build the next generation of shipwrights, welders, machinists, and engineers. We must restore pride in skilled labor, kind of pride that built victory ships in record time and submarines that still patrol today. Every apprenticeship we sponsor, every trade program we expand, every high school student we inspire adds one more link to America's chain of readiness. We need your help to restore the idea that working in the trades is not just honorable, it's indispensable. Because when we talk about national security, we're really talking about economic security, industrial security, and the dignity of work. Every job that supports the Navy strengthens America and protects our national security. So my message to you is simple. I need you. I need your innovation, your production, your resolve. Because rebuilding America's Navy is not a Navy project, it's a national imperative. Together we will prove that the might of our fleet is built on the might of our people, that freedom of the seas depends on the freedom to build. And when America decides to lead, no rival on earth can match our ingenuity or will. We are rebuilding a Navy worthy of the sailors and Marines who serve under its flag. We're rebuilding America's Navy ship by ship, yard by yard, state by state. And when the next generation of sailors and Marines set sail under our flag, they'll do so knowing that the might of the American industry stands behind them. Thank you. May God bless all of you. May God bless the great state of Indiana. And may God bless the United States of America and the Navy and Marine Corps that defend her. Thanks.
Well, word gets around in a small, small town. They said he was a dangerous man, but Mama was proud and she stood her ground.
Very good. Thank you for those remarks. I especially appreciate that line. I'm going to steal it from you. Indiana's the quiet giant of defense industry. That's what this event is all about, to bring our defense industry together with leaders like you and talk about how we can grow it and build upon it. And wanted to have a quick conversation with you. And I think, David, we're going to open it up for maybe a couple of questions in the room as well when we're done. Is that the plan? Yes. It strikes me, as you've come all the way to Fort Wayne, Indiana, and as I've gotten to know you, and I don't want to embarrass you, but you've been enormously successful in business, and now you're providing this incredible public service to the Navy. And as I'm sitting on the Armed Services Committee and going through the confirmation process for you and a lot of the new leaders at the Pentagon, I recognize, and I think everyone in the room recognizes, how unconventional President Trump's picks have been to shake up the Pentagon. I wonder if you could talk for a moment about that, your unique business background and what that means to shaking up bureaucracy and doing what we need to do to make the Navy stronger, better, bigger, and how does that business background apply to that?
Well, thank you for having me, and thanks for the question. I think, very early on, I said, I think in maybe my second or third speech, I said, we're in the business of warfare. And it created some kind of, some people thought, this business guy. It is what we do. We are in the business of warfare. And I often ask in my meetings when we're going through things about, sir, it'll take us 6 years to design this, 10 years to build it. It'll take us 3 years to design this missile and 3 years to make it. What would we do if we were at war? And they're like, well, we would cut that in half and we would do things much faster. Why aren't we doing that? Like, that is our business. Why is our attitude not that because we are at war in our own way and we need to understand it. And so I think, what I have found in the Navy, which is great, is we have an incredible amount of talent in the Navy and the Marine Corps. And we have really top talent that is mired in 20th century processes. And they want to change and they want to get better. And And I think bringing a businessman's perspective and looking at things a little bit differently, I think for them, hopefully, has been refreshing. And I found that they really embrace the way I look at it. You know, I constantly kind of challenge them when we're looking at, like, you know, there's one ship that I'm looking at right now in a class that is basically 80% of the cost of another ship and 60% of its capability. So if you were in business, you would kill that ship and just build the other ones. And I think when you start to frame things that way and look at things that way, they begin to say, yes, that's the right way to look at it. So I think it's been a big advantage, to be honest, coming from a business background and looking at the processes and studying them and trying to figure out how to adopt more modern practices. You know, I've now visited, I think I'm up to 12 U.S. shipyards and 4 foreign shipyards. And when I tell you we are stuck in 1980s manufacturing in these yards, even in some of our missile manufacturing plants that I've visited, it's astounding to me that we have not updated. And I think that, you know, we've unfortunately created behaviors and incentives that don't make sense. And I think with a businessman, you can question those and say, why are we doing this? Why does it make sense? So I don't try to focus on who's to blame or where's the problem. I just focus on, how do we fix this? How do we change this? How do we, you know, if everyone beats up all the big primes, and I get it, but they behave the way they do because we created the incentives for them to behave that way. And it's the same thing with the Navy. And so we just need to change the incentive structures. And I think that's the perspective I get to bring.
You have the perfect background to do that. And President Trump he has that attitude, right? I mean, we have to fix it. It's not working. And I like, when I sat down with you and did our initial interview in my office after you were nominated by the president, I liked your story. Maybe you could share it with everybody about how intensely focused President Trump is on shipbuilding. He was hammering you and beating you up about it even before you were confirmed in office. And can you talk about that? Why President Trump gets this, he understands this. How focused is he on shipbuilding?
Yeah, I can't overstate the president's engagement. He is very, you know, when I was nominated and not confirmed, a couple of different times, you know, he sent over pictures of rusted U.S. ships in ports. He sent pictures of other ships and that looked better than ours, and is like, you know, I remember he called me one time. I think it was literally like 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning. He goes, "What are you doing?" I said, "Oh, you know, sir, reading the Wall Street Journal." And he started laughing. He goes, "Were you sleeping?" I go, "Yeah, I was." But he goes, "Well, can you talk?" I go, "Absolutely." And he goes, "I really don't like this rusted ships. What are you doing about it?" And I said, "You know, sir, I'm not confirmed yet." And so there's not much I can do about it. He goes, "Really?" I go, "Yeah." And he goes, "Okay, well, we need to fix that. We need to get on that, and we need to get ships done." He goes, you know, he understands that to be a superpower, you need to be a sea power. And that's just a fact. And so he is very focused on this and us basically maintaining our competitive edge. He does not like the fact that we have given up making things in this country. And he's right. And I think we really have hollowed out our ability to make things. And I think, you know, one of the things that I'm trying to do, and one of the things in the Navy, I think everybody loves to talk about Silicon Valley and VC and technology and bringing all this new stuff in. That's great, but I need people who make things, not coders. And I really do believe that the next 10 years, people who make things are going to be the really indispensable skill that we need. And it's already happening in front of us. Look how difficult computer science majors are getting jobs. It's because AI codes faster, and it will. So, but AI can't fix your air conditioning. AI can't make a aircraft carrier. AI can't bend steel. These are all things that we're going to need, and these are jobs that are highly skilled, and candidly, the president has focused on this. We need to get wages up to a more requisite level where they deserve to be for these highly skilled trades, and that's something we're very focused on.
I like how you put that in your speech, and it takes technology and the people to get it done. And one thing we did in the Big Beautiful Bill that you were a big part of was to invest money in AI, in shipbuilding. We have Shyam Sankar from Palantir here, and we're going to talk about this a little bit in a moment too, but can you talk about how important that is, what that looks like, and what this investment from the Big Beautiful Bill will do to marry those two, technology and the people to get it done?
Yeah, so I think there are a couple things the One Big Beautiful Bill did. So it gave us, I believe it's 13 different combat ships, and then there's the add-on from OMB, which is another 50 ships. So hopefully we'll get that, which will really help kickstart the maritime industrial base building we need to do. But there's also a significant amount of money for unmanned or uncrewed, what do you want to call it, and also for shipyard optimization investment. So actual investment in our infrastructure, in our dry docks. You know, we are piloting a Palantir system in 2 of our public yards as we speak. I saw this system at Hyundai and in Korea. Very impressive system. Saw it at Hanwha as well. And I think it'll help speed up some of the things we're doing. I mean, you know, just the way we even lay out our factory is crazy. Like for workers to have to go to the bathroom, it was a different building, it was a mile away. We were losing all of these kinds of efficiencies that normally you would see. Like if you go into an Amazon plant or SpaceX, laid out very, very differently. You know, I think we need to bring in technology because the complexity of our manufacturing is something to be seen. I've told people if you're lucky enough to go in and see a nuclear ballistic submarine being manufactured, it is like nothing I have ever seen. It makes SpaceX look like a walk in the park because it's an underwater space station in effect, and it is incredibly complicated. And so we need technology to track this, to make things better, to make things, you know, we use across the fleet a bunch of different components, and we could have standardization across the fleet in many ways, and we don't do that. And so these are things that we're implementing slowly but surely and trying to put into our practices. And I think technology can be a huge help to that.
One of the important things that Secretary of War Hegseth talked about was fixing the recruitment crisis. Yeah. And as you know, the last 4 years under President Biden and some of the characters that he had around him running the Pentagon, we had the worst recruitment crisis in the over 50 years of an all-volunteer force in this country. And I have a lot of theories about why that was the case. And I think politics had a lot to do with it. But can you talk about what you have done historically to fix that? I mean, now the Navy has far exceeded your recruitment and retention goals, and that happened, it seemed to have happened overnight. In fact, it did happen overnight on Election Day, when we elected a president and a commander-in-chief who inspired a younger generation to want to raise their right hand and serve their country like I did and so many people in this room. And as a side note to that, it did occur to me over the 4 years as I focused on this on the House Armed Services Committee that in spite of the Army, Air Force, and Navy falling so far behind on recruitment, the Marines were steady. What did the Marines have figured out over those 4 years that maybe the Navy lost, and how did you fix it?
So I think for the Marines, the great thing about them is they stay very true to their ethos, right? They stay, you know, the few, the proud, the Marines. You know, all of us can say it, all of us know it. They really stay very attached to what their mission is. They're constantly evolving. And honestly, it's something we're gonna do in the Navy as well. The Marines put some of their best up-and-coming generals into recruiting. So human capital recruitment is extremely important to them. The other services don't really do, the Navy doesn't do that, the other services don't. And so for you to move up in the Marines, you have to be a very good recruiter. And the people you're recruiting and the talent you have is a mark of your leadership. And so I think that's a really smart way to look at things, to be honest. And so I think for the Marines, it was, they didn't really change. They didn't really get involved in the things that I think impacted recruiting. You know, for us in the Navy, we were over 40,000 people. We were 3 months ahead. And I think that's really attributable to President Trump. And I think, candidly, it's attributable to the fact that he doesn't apologize for America. You know, we got into this apologetic sense of, you know, service is not a great thing, or, you know, we don't do these things, or, yeah, you should look at other things. And I think it turned a lot of people off, to be honest. And I think we started to see the numbers candidly start to climb when Biden turned it over to Kamala. I think people then kind of realized probably he's gonna win, and the numbers just started slowly accelerating up. And I think people saw that this was a man who cared about them, who cared about America, who cared about the mission, and they said, I want to be a part of that. And I think that's why our recruitment has gone up so much. And you see it in the pride in young recruits. You know, I go to the Naval Academy. I was at the Air Force game, who we beat, and hopefully we're going to beat Army in December, and it should be a good thing for sure. And so, you know, you can see the pride, and even at recruiting stations, people are really excited about joining, and I think that's a great thing.
I think, Secretary, you're going to go down in history as one of the best secretaries of the Navy that we've ever had, and a lot of it's going to be because of that, what you've done to restore the Navy back to what it's supposed to be about, shipbuilding and all of it. I want to turn this over to questions in the audience, so I don't know where the microphones are, but while they're searching for someone with a good question, what do you think of Fort Wayne? You stayed downtown, this is a great city. We have a great region. My dad, we talked about your dad, was a doctor. My dad worked in a hot, sweaty factory for 30 years in Fort Wayne, Indiana, made axles. And we have a lot of defense industry businesses who are represented here, but it's those men and women like my dad who did the hard work and do the hard work that make things in our region, that make this region great. But I hope you enjoyed Fort Wayne. I
did. It was a great time. We had a great dinner last night. That restaurant was excellent. Hotel, the Bradley was very nice. I enjoyed it. I love coming to the Midwest.
Did you buy your wife a Vera Bradley bag?
I've not bought her a Vera Bradley bag, but I will keep that in mind and stop by before I leave, because I'll probably get yelled at for not doing that.
Thank you for being here. I'm Joy Pullman with The Federalist. First, I'd like to ask you just how specifically you plan to work on especially recruiting the dockyard workers needed for all of these new development of ships. And related to that, can you give an update on the Secretary of War's reinstatement of service members in the Navy who were booted over the COVID shot mandate? How many have been officially reinstated to date? How many are waiting that? And what is your team doing to ensure that partisan bureaucrats are not stonewalling that process? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. So, look, we have a thing called SIOP, which is the Shipyard Investment Optimization Plan, which is a way to get wages back up. And I think this is really an issue of wages, to be honest, when I look at it across states. You know, it is when you have workers who make the same money at Buc-ee's or at Amazon versus being in a welding outfit all day in very tight corners, it's hard to get that person to want to do that job. So we are going to have to adjust wages to be competitive. And that is what we're focused on. And we did that to some extent in our recent contracts on the submarines in Groton and Quonset. And I think we need to figure out how to do that across. I think also, to be honest, look, I'm going to spend some time with the unions, because one of the surprising things I found, so whenever I go to a shipyard, I spend, you know, a good hour with the workers as well. And one of the things at 3 of the 4 shipyards I got was, hey, we'd like to do other things, but we're kind of stuck. You know, a pipe fitter can only work on a specific aspect and can't do other things. And I said, well, guys, you're talking to the wrong guy. You got to go talk to your unions, but I will help you try to do that. But the desire for the workers to be able to do more also exists. And so I think we got to try to get a little more flexible in work rules and accommodate that with wages. So I think that there's some of that, you know, the private and public shipyards are going to have to try to navigate. But that to me is the real issue that we need to do, and we need to update what they have. And look, I think there's also, we need to get the actual businesses building the ship to invest some of their own capital. I had one CEO of one shipyard complain to me that he had a 109-year-old building, and what was I going to do about it? And my response was, why is that my problem? You have billions of dollars of contracts, and you want me to build you a building too? What am I going to get in return? And so, we have conditioned things in a bad way, and that's that company can act that way because they're one of the few builders that can build this. We need to get competition also into the arena, and so I think that will be a very important aspect. As to your COVID questions, I don't have the specific numbers in my head, but we have been moving out on that pretty quickly. I think we are pretty far ahead of most of the other services as it relates to that. I have a current acting ASN in Manpower who is specifically working on that. And candidly, I've also put the Undersecretary of the Navy to focus on this and to get this done and out there as fast as possible so we get that remedied. And I believe we've moved out on that and continue to move out on that. From what I last saw, we have gotten that process down from taking 6 months to somewhere between 1 and 2 months to get resolved. But I can have someone follow up with you to give you specific numbers.
Question in the back. Who's next? It's a long ways back there.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Tony Kennett, Daily Signal and Hoosier Native. Just a quick question on China's rapid advancement in drone measures. The Navy has its work cut out for it, as does the Air Force, in developing rapid countermeasures for those. Also with the reports that China is deploying a lot of their potential suicide drone systems on those little coral reef points they call islands to expand their coastline. Does the administration, I know you earlier mentioned the undersecretary in respect to technological advancement, how much is the Navy focusing on deploying drone countermeasures on new ship builds and in our installations?
Yeah, so, we, across the Navy, we had over 70 programs doing research, of which probably close to half were doing the same thing. And that is why we centralized the process. That's why I took one of our outstanding admirals, Admiral Seiko Okano, who's a 1-star, and brought her up to a 3-star to basically stand up this new group, to basically consolidate, organize our unmanned efforts and make sure we were testing in real time and adapting in real time. And we are trying out multiple programs right now, particularly in the Indo-Pacific, both defense, ISR, offense, across the board. Making sure this integrates in with the systems will be one of the key facts that we need to get our arms around, because you can have all these systems, but if they can't communicate with one another, you're going to have a problem. So these are things that we are focusing on, and we thought by centralizing it, it would allow us to move quicker and faster. And I think one of the things that I'll be talking to the senator about and to the guys on the Hill is we cannot programmatically fund our unmanned efforts. If we do, then we will be building obsolete things. The speed of iteration in unmanned is incredible, and it is happening very fast. So just to give you an example, in the Ukraine, if I had bought what they were using 6 months ago, it is 5 generations behind. So we can't programmatically fund this and say, this is it, this is what we're gonna build. We have to build adaptability and iteration inside to that procurement cycle. And that's something that they did in the One Big Beautiful Bill, which we greatly appreciate, which allows us to get that sort of iteration. And hopefully we'll continue to do that. But it is a key point. I think unmanned has changed the nature of warfare. But also, look, you have to realize in the Indo-Pacific, you've got the tyranny of distance. Drones traveling very far with ordnance, that's a big challenge. And so understand that how they're used and how you defend against them is going to be a very big deal, but that integration will be the key to victory in my mind.
Our countdown clock is in the negative, so I've got to cut this off. But before I do, I want to thank you again for your incredible commitment to Crane. Crane is so important to Indiana. And I know Phil Smith and the guy, we have a lot of guys here who are from Crane, leadership at Crane, and you have taken more of an interest in Crane than any Secretary of the Navy in the 9 years that I've been in Washington, D.C., and I appreciate that very much. So, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking the Secretary of the Navy for coming to Fort Wayne today and being a part of this event.
Hello. Yeah, we're working. Hi, everybody. Most everybody's taken their seats. If we ask you to grab a seat, we'll get this panel started. We're playing a little bit of catch up, so we're going to try and move on out. I'd say good morning to everybody. I'm Brant Hirschman from Barnes & Thornburg. And I just want to echo, Mark Lewis earlier said thanks to Senator Banks and his staff. What a tremendous, and for those of us who've been here, a growing event, growing in importance. Obviously, the caliber of the speakers is tremendous, but if you look to your left and your right, the people around the room, it's a very strong caliber of attendees as well. And you deserve a lot of credit for taking your time to come up here and interact with your peers. So thank you for doing so. Senator Banks and I served together in the Indiana Senate. Actually, two Senator Banks, both he and his wife served briefly while he was on assignment in Afghanistan. And we share a couple of things, all of the Banks and I and my wife Lisa, a sense of humor and a sense of competitiveness. And so this kind of feels like a young, growing Huntsville kind of moment for Northeast Indiana and for the state of Indiana as a whole. To that end, back in 2010, my wife wrote what became a best-selling business book, Faster, Cheaper, Better, on business management reform. And in reading it, I looked to take lessons from how it not only affected business, those lessons, but how it affected the state of Indiana. What could we do to become more competitive and attractive to business? We put together a bipartisan commission. The results of that commission resulted in legislation that moved Indiana up 30 places in the business competitiveness ranking in 3 years. And not too long after that, the then governor looked at me and said, okay, what do we do for an encore? You know, what next? And my comment to him was that the most unrealized potential in my mind in the state of Indiana was in the defense sector. And he said, why? And I said, we're the #1 manufacturing state in the nation. We have a top 10 business and regulatory climate. And we are the fountain of innovation with Purdue University, with IU, with Notre Dame, with Rose-Hulman. We are the cradle of astronauts. We have the talent, both in the workforce and in academia, and we need to overperform in that space. What we didn't have was an aggressive advocate on the Senate Armed Services Committee. Problem solved, and here we are. And so with me is a great distinguished panel of folks who have done business in Indiana for varying amounts of time in various parts of the defense sector. And what I'm just going to do, because we're a little pressed, is turn to them in turn and ask them, what do you do in Indiana? What brought you here? And based upon the challenges we heard of and the future plans that Secretary Phelan and Secretary Hegseth laid out this morning, what opportunities do you see for yourself as a company? And how does that factor in to your footprint in Indiana? Now, it'll be a little different because Phil Smith is with Crane, a tireless advocate for Crane. So he can tell us a little bit about the history of the facility and that partnership with the private sector and what opportunities he sees. So, Rob, I'll turn to you first from L3 Harris, and we'll go from there.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Thanks for having us. Thanks to Senator Banks for allowing all of us to participate in the local panel, which is very important. At L3 Harris, we've always believed in Indiana. We've been here for coming up on 98 years now. Starting, what brought us to Indiana was phonographs, record changers, television in its infancy. And we knew, I think, from that moment that we started that innovation, pioneering, talent, hard work ethic were hallmarks of Indiana and the workforce here. And with the schools you mentioned, among several others within 200 miles of us, we are really the cradle of talent for the nation. We have been innovators for decades. And certainly our company, as we transitioned from consumer electronics to electronics and communications and sensing for World War II, through infrared sensing then that went to space soon after Sputnik, that created the basis for all of our weather monitoring and forecasting. Every weather satellite image you've ever seen behind the weather person has come from us and our company in Fort Wayne, to the moment in 2018 when we thought this same technology could be used for missile tracking of advanced hypersonic glide vehicles. And we got laughter first. And then we went from 0 to $3 billion in backlog in that area. And we maintain that commitment to Indiana because we figured out how to do that mission, right? And that mission is a very, very difficult mission. We talked about it a little bit yesterday, right? You're looking for the friction between the atmosphere and the hypersonic glide vehicle from space with a background that is significantly warmer and brighter than it, right? So advanced algorithms developed here, onboard processing developed here, infrared sensing from space developed here. In addition, a way to manufacture those things in a proliferated approach that rested on sort of our prior history of a manufacturing capability. Automation, streamlining, many of the same things Secretary Hegseth talked about here, where acquisition reform is necessary, constant demand signal is necessary, streamlining in manufacturing to create speed. Our $125 million facility we just opened earlier this year anticipated that demand signal, automated for streamlining and speed, was based on contracts which were not FAR-based, which were not cost-plus, which were fixed price, other transactional agreements, very commercialized. So we stand ready for what we know the nation needs. We've demonstrated much of it in space already. So our next generation capability is here and now. And our commitment to Indiana is here and now based on that set of investments that we've made. So thanks again for having me.
Thanks, and we may circle back, time permitting, but Mike?
Yeah, thanks. So Mike Johns with Kratos Defense. We're a multinational company, not headquartered in Indiana. So we're sort of new kids on the block in Indiana, but not new to Indiana. So actually Phil and I have been working together for over 20 years on different projects and programs that are important for the nation, that are important to grow, but not necessarily important for a particular company. So it's doing things for the nation over what's individually good for our individual corporations. That has paid a lot of dividends over the years on bringing things to forward, like the Conventional Prompt Strike program and some other things that we've really collaborated on. I actually in Birmingham as my headquarters, and have been around Huntsville for a very long time. I know what Huntsville is. I know what it means to be successful there. And it's that partnership between the government, and it's a partnership between industry, it's congressional delegations, the business community, the economic development community, and everything that goes into doing that. So that's really what kind of drove us to thinking about Indiana as a major area for expansion. So what have we done? So we, earlier this year, were selected as the prime for the MACH-TB program. If you know what the MACH-TB program is, this is the revolutionary way to test hypersonics. Low cost, high cadence. Rather than testing 1 or 2 times a year, flight testing, we're gonna test 50 times a year. Rather than doing it at $100 million test events, we're gonna do it at $10 million test events. Whereas that program is centered out of Crane, and today, if you go down to Westgate area, right behind Westgate Academy, you're gonna see a massive building coming out of the ground, 75,000 square foot payload integration facility, so we can do ship and shoot payloads for hypersonic flights anywhere in the world on time, and doing partnerships with Crane, but not only Crane, The other thing is at the NSWC is the Army. So it has a massive logistics enterprise that we can use to ship anything we need to be. We need to be in Australia for a launch, we're using them for their logistics manpower for that. We also have just announced a partnership on radar systems. And so right next to what we call the Indiana Payload Integration Facility, we're going to be building a big radar integration complex that's going to be twice the size of the building that's already coming out of the ground. And so a lot of these things are the things that are sort of new announcements. One of the other things that was mentioned earlier by Senator Banks was what's happening in Bloomfield. So 6 miles away from Westgate and deep into the cornfields, literally, as actually soybean this year, we are building a 600-acre campus, close to 50 buildings, and going to be developing one of the largest solid rocket motor and warhead production facilities in the United States as a merchant supplier to everybody in the industry. So that you're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars in investments, hundreds of jobs. And the reason we chose that area is we did a site selection process, formal site selection. We did 14 different states, 42 different sites. We went all over the country looking at things. And what drove us to this area was, as mentioned a couple times, work ethic, business climate, economic development climate, the collaboration between industry, academia, and government, state and federal, all of that coming together to make a project successful. And so, Southern Indiana went out over Texas, Arkansas, a lot of these other places that already have massive enterprises supporting solid rocket motor production facilities. We wanted to come and invest in an area where we could make a difference. And frankly, we wanted to be part of the solution to how do we make Crane and Westgate look a lot like Huntsville. And I think that's been super important for us as we've gone through that. Our philosophy is really matching what you've heard from the Secretary of War, you've heard from Senator Banks, which is how do we lean forward and do things when you're in uncertain environments, right? We started building a facility before we ever were under contract on MACH-TB because we knew that facility is required independent of whether or not we won that contract. We just knew the industry. Like we know we were building a solid rocket motor production facility, spending hundreds of millions of dollars without a single contract in hand, because we know that is required. And so I think that is what you're seeing, a forecasted demand. We want all that stuff. Like we want a demand signal that says we're going to buy these things from you way down the road, but we also need companies that are going to lean in and say we'll do it without that too. And that's what we're doing. So turn it over to Phil.
Yeah, I'm Phil Smith. I'm the Command Advocacy Lead for NSWC Crane. And before I talk a little bit about Crane, I want to quickly say, maybe not even quickly, because I'll probably take too long to say this, but Senator Banks has been a huge advocate. If you guys haven't been able to tell, a huge advocate for Crane, and I think he's almost made it a drinking game. How many times he can say Crane in the summit. But for us, it hasn't been just when he's a senator, is when he was in the state General Assembly. He talked about Crane in the State House. When he was a congressman, and I know this comment's going to be a little bit controversial given all the things that are going on in the state, he used to tell me, he says, Phil, I pretend Crane's in my district. So he always treated us as we were part of his district and was a huge advocate, would bring folks from DC to visit us. And he knew that hypersonics was important to the state. He knew hypersonics was important to us. He stood up the hypersonic caucus in the House, which still stands today. He championed the Joint Hypersonics Transition Office, which was still a need that Dr. Joel Jewell's probably going to get his hands on once he's confirmed. And he was a tireless champion of what needed to be done and for us back at Crane. And then now he's been a senator. It hasn't stopped. I mean, he's mentioned this in the Oval Office. When he did that, my phone blew up constantly. Did you see it? 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 And yes, I saw it. If there's a hearing, we get a clip because he constantly is asking these 4-stars and nominees about Crane, and we take that clip, we send it out to the workforce. It gives us tremendous pride and a lot of morale boosting to say it. And I send it to my corporate comms, and by the time they get done with the first one, I got a second one coming through. So he's just been a fantastic advocate. I'm normally behind the curtain, kind of not up here on stage, let other people talk, but I told myself if I ever got a chance be up on the stage, I was going to take the time to thank him. And as Mark Lewis said earlier, Dr. Lewis said earlier today, it's not just him, it's his staff. This unbelievable access, and you know, there's not an event at Crane that I don't turn around and see somebody from his staff. Usually it was Chris Crabtree. I think he's passed the torch now to Dominic, but yeah, just fantastic support from the senator. So I can't thank him enough. So I don't see him in the room, so can you please tell him I thanked him? So all right, NSWC Crane. So you know, our origins date back to just prior to World War II. And I often say this when we have visitors, is that at the time they were anticipating entering into the war, and they thought there were some vulnerabilities on the East and West Coast, and they wanted to get the ordnance and munitions off the East and West Coast. So I often say that what was true then is true now. We want to get the things off the East and West Coast and bring it to the Midwest. And that was the origin. So 6 days prior to the bombing of Pearl Harbor, you know, NSWC Crane, or NSA Crane at the time, was commissioned. And that's really our genesis of how we ended up in southern Indiana, a naval base in southern Indiana. And there's been, inflection points throughout the history of Crane, and in terms of the Army taking over the munitions portion that created the what we call CAAA, Crane Army and Ammunition Activity, a tenant activity on the base. I'm with NSWC Crane, so we're another tenant on the base. And so it's 64,000 acres, and if you, we often say that we're NSWC is 80% of the workforce, 20% of the land, and CAAA is 80% of the land, 20% of the workforce. When on any given day, roughly about 6,000 people will show up to work each day. That includes the government civilian folks such as myself, and then the contractors that are located on the base or just outside. Our primary missions on the base is really rooted in strategic missions. That's the area I grew up. That's where we have hypersonics, microelectronics, radiation microelectronics for our strategic weapons. We have a deep heritage in over 70 years supporting the submarine leg of the ballistic missile. We also support the Air Force. We're not only are we unique in the sense that we are a Navy base in southern Indiana, we're a Navy base that supports all services. And that's very true in our nuclear modernization efforts. The department doesn't want to duplicate what we have at Crane, and we're very unique at what we have. That's our genesis of hypersonics. I touched on the Joint Hypersonic Transition Office. We have a deep footprint there supporting that program. We've got very involved in these initiatives coming directly out of DepSecWar's office. Mike mentioned it earlier, MACH-TB. We just had an industry day for this MACH-XL. So this is another innovative way only to try to bring new industry partners, non-traditionals, you probably have all heard that, into the game, to get some seed funding out there, to see what else capabilities out there. We're also trying to change the acquisition process in that effort. The way we incentivize industry and going to have award fee based on performance, and put a lot of the emphasis on let industry bring us their idea versus us giving them a bunch of requirements. The electromagnetic warfare is another deep area. Like I think we often say we have 1,200 RF engineers, the largest RF engineering within the Department of War, working on all sorts of surface sensors and radar sensors and electronic detect, electronic defeat. That's the area where we get very heavily involved in counter UAS, and then it's an area which is a brand new initiative that we are spearheading for the department called Drone Dominance. This is really a complementary effort in which we heard about the National Guard talk about yesterday, but the department wants us to go help buy and procure a large quantity of one-way attack drones. I don't think I'm getting out in front of anybody. This is coming soon, right? So this is another effort that we are rapidly spearing up and coming to industry, and we'll be working with our partners in the National Guard. And then within the expeditionary warfare, this is an area that we often say we're the closest one to the warfighter, even though we're 500 miles away from the coast. This is our special operators. We'll work with them collectively on what is their, I think we heard SecWar talk about the 85% solution. These folks sometimes just want the 60% solution. Get something out there quick. you know, whether it's a rifle change or a weapon change or munitions. We work closely with them. This is where I think we've bolted anything and everything onto anything that had 4 wheels coming out of your factory, we bolted something onto it in order to get it over to theater and get it into the warfighter's hands. And then Mike mentioned earlier, then we obviously have the Army and the partnership. But that was like what we have historically done looking inside the fence. There was a rapid change in philosophy around the 2005 timeframe where we were asked to, like, it's not just what we do inside the fence. We had to go create an ecosystem outside the fence and partner. And that's where I came, you know, I was part of the Director of Engagement Office. My job is to go out here and build these relationships with folks such as yourself and with industry and academia and then the Guard as well. That's where I first met Danielle Chrysler, who I got to see for the first time in a long time. That's where I met Brand. I went into Brand's office in DC. I was so impressed by his office, I thought I was gonna have to take off my shoes before I walked in. I mean, it was fantastic. So it's been a lot of fun. It's been a long time. I can get pretty emotional about it because I grew up in Southern Indiana. That's where I was born and raised, and we're trying not only to make a national impact, but we recognize our role with the state. So
let me hop in here and give John a chance. And probably, I would say we're very reasonably priced advocacy. The office is, we just take good care of it. So. John, go right ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Brant. And once again, thanks to Senator Banks and his team for putting this event on. I think I've been to all 4 of them. They just keep getting better every year. Can't wait to see what you guys do next year. So I'm John Chadbourne. I work for AM General. We are an Indiana company. We have been for a very, very long time. Our first government contract was in the 1850s, where we produced wagons for the U.S. Army. And then, of course, we produced Jeeps in World War II, Deuce and a Halfs in the Korean War. We've been producing the iconic Humvee for over 40 years. And recently, we've started to produce the Joint Light Tactical Vehicle A2, built a $150 million factory in Mishawaka. And that's the most advanced light tactical vehicle in the world right now. So, you know, produced over 1.5 million vehicles. We've got about 300,000 that are out there in the world. And so, you know, that's basically what we do. We produce light tactical vehicles. So as we talk a lot of this innovation, it's, you know, I don't think we can produce a hypersonic Humvee, but we'll work on it. So you know, how it really pertains to us is, you know, we look at how can we be part of the system, right? How can we be, you know, what is in it, the system is integrated on to be that platform that gets that technology into the battlefield. You know, and we're really focused a lot on autonomy because we do see that autonomous land systems. We just announced this last month that we're teaming with Textron and Carnegie Robotics on an autonomous vehicle that will be based on the Humvee platform. But its main purpose will be able to basically bring that capability into the battlefield. So whatever that is. We've also been very fortunate in that you know. Both the Israel Defense Forces and the Ukrainian Defense Army has thousands of our vehicles. And so we're getting real world feedback constantly, you know, about what they're doing, what kind of improvements they're making, what different kind of weapon systems they're integrating. And, you know, in Ukraine, their test time is about 2 days, right? And they get it out on the battlefield. And we were able to take advantage of that as well. We have this technology called soft recoil. It's this the ability to basically reduce the recoil on our artillery by about 70%. What that enables you to do is put a much heavier gun onto a light vehicle. So we put a 105 on a Humvee. We can put a 155 onto an FMTV. So we basically gave, we call it the Hawkeye, the 105 on a Humvee, to the Ukrainian Army and asked them to test it. They tested it for a couple of months and said, hey, we'd like to put this in combat. So they put it in combat for about a year and really gave us great feedback. And so we've been able to use that. And, you know, we've actually incorporated that into that system. And then, you know, we're going to start producing here shortly for them for that. So, you know, there are lots of opportunities we see in the future, and we're looking forward to being part of that.
That's great, John. Thank you. And I would just say, provides a nice overview because here's a defense leader in Fort Wayne, a defense leader in South Bend. We obviously are talking a lot about Crane. It would be remiss if we didn't mention, to those of you who are not from here, some of the other great opportunities and facilities we have. Obviously, we have the fighter wing here in Fort Wayne. We have Grissom Air Reserve Base, some of the finest KC-135 refuelers deploying all over the world. We've got Camp Atterbury, which has served as a training ground for countless troops headed overseas, as well as training here for so that they understand the environments that they're going into. The Indiana National Guard is consistently ranked as one of the most operationally ready National Guard units in the United States. And they do a tremendous service to Indiana and to the nation. We have Muscatatuck. So there's all of this ecosystem that has opportunity. Crane gets a lot of attention, as it should, because it's on the tip of the spear with many of the things we're talking about. But when I speak about that unrealized defense potential, we've got tremendous opportunities. And as we wrap up here, I would share a little story. A number of years ago, and this is a call to action for all of you who are doing business in Indiana now. A number of years ago, I was asked to dinner at the last minute by a law partner of mine who said, "Hey, I've got a friend here in town from a defense contractor. Would you like to come to dinner?" And it just so happened that at least one of the other folks from the table was from Indiana, and we spent all night talking about how great Indiana was. And the president of the defense unit was sitting there at the table, and he didn't say much. He was from upstate New York. Nice guy. At the end of the dinner, he looked at his team and said, "Are they on the list?" I know what list he was talking about. And they said, "No." He said, "Well, why aren't they on the list?" So, "Well, the site selector didn't put them on the list." He said, "I just put them on the list." And when they got done doing their evaluation for their national expansion, the final 2 locations were in Indiana. So we had a 100% chance. And as a result, Saab Defense is building the T-7 trainer fuselages in West Lafayette, Indiana. But it only happened because the relentless cheerleader in between bites was talking about how great Indiana is. One of the things that I think we as a state don't do enough of is tell our own story. So for those of you who are here today hearing from these gentlemen about why they're here and what successes they've had, I just ask you to go out and tell somebody else. Something important is happening here as a group, and we all have a responsibility to be a part of it. And insofar as you have things you'd like to have improved or changed, or we're competitive with other states, as I mentioned, my wife, the OMB secretary, is sitting here, so she's in charge of the money. You can grab her on the way out and tell her how much of a check you need, and then I'll run for the car. We've got 2 minutes left, speed round here. Let me ask you guys, obviously we've got some of the best universities in the United States. Tell me about your workforce talent needs. Are they being met? What do you need more of? And how can we help?
I think from our standpoint, certainly the half dozen top universities are within 200 miles of us, right? 6 of the top 15 engineering schools in the nation, some of which were mentioned, are close to us. We have been working with not only sort of research and development project discussions, but also curriculum discussions where we continue to demand workforce is in sort of prime contract, systems architecture, systems engineering skills that are really evolving with the evolution of space as we become proliferated and ubiquitous in space. There are more and more sort of big picture constellation level architecture discussions that we're having that require that sort of discussion. On the other side of it, we have to continue to make more speedy, affordable capability, which also is driving it on the application side, right? Packaging, thermal management, industrial and manufacturing engineering to drive best practice manufacturing skills into our factories, like the factory we just built. So those are the areas where we're.
Mike?
Yeah, just to add to that, it's one of the reasons we selected to come here was not only the university involvement, so everything from hypersonics to energetics to microelectronics at Purdue and IU and Notre Dame and these other schools, but as we think about launching something like a brand new energetics manufacturing, Prometheus Energetics in Bloomfield. It's the partnerships with places like Ivy Tech and Vincennes universities that is where we need to have a very specially trained workforce to produce explosives, right? And the partnerships that they're willing to lean in and sort of do that is develop certificate programs for us, customized training programs. All of those different things that we need is one of the reasons we selected to come.
That's fantastic input. Thanks. Phil, I'm going to skip you and go to John.
I think we've covered everything, Brandon. I see Adam looking at me, so we're good.
All right. Hey, thanks, everybody. Appreciate the chance to be with you. And once again, thanks to Senator Banks and his fantastic staff. What a great event. We'll see you next year.
I was 10, I was thin, I was playing first base with the
Thank you, everyone. We will begin our next session in 4 minutes at 11:05. At 11:05.
Hi, good morning, everyone. We're going to get started here in just a few seconds. If you don't mind taking your seats, we are excited for our next panel. Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Mike Keating, and I am really excited and honored to moderate this next panel. Ostensibly, the theme of it is startups in the defense space. What does this mean? What does the zeitgeist of this moment really mean? Where has it been? Where is it going, et cetera? I am the executive director of an organization called the Silicon Valley Defense Group, or SVDG. I have spent the duration of my career around emerging defense technology broadly, but most importantly for today, I am the son of a proud mother from Indianapolis, so shout out, Mom. She's tickled that I'm sitting on this panel. What is Silicon Valley Defense Group? So SVDG is a 10-year-old nonprofit. We are a 501c3 that exists as a conduit between founders, funders, and the policymakers that acquire these innovative technologies. We were born out of a series of conversations with Senator John McCain in his office about 10 years ago after a realization point that 3 crystallizing events were happening. 1, SpaceX was showing Silicon Valley that they should turn back to their roots in defense and that there were indeed returns on investments in defense. 2, commercial software was becoming relevant for 21st century battlefields. And 3, we had the return of great power competition. What this meant in total was that the locus of innovation was shifting, at least in part, from FFRDCs, from service branch research labs to commercial centers of excellence, in particular, venture capital-backed startups. However, as everyone in the room knows, there were and remain enormous hurdles to innovation and innovation adoption from these non-traditional sources of innovation. And that's what Silicon Valley Defense Group does today. Look, America doesn't have an innovation problem. It does have an innovation adoption challenge inside our defense and intelligence communities. As SVDG reflects on the last 10 years of growth in this space, we recognize that our adversaries in the PRC don't call any of this defense innovation, they just call it defense. And that's a mindset that we have to adopt. We have to shift from a focus in our ecosystem from innovation period to innovation adoption. And that's what we're here to talk about today. The good news is that is exactly what's happening, and there is tremendous reason for optimism. So for the next 40 minutes or so, I'm gathered by, honestly, this is an unusually awesome group of rock stars and change agents in our space. And we're here to demystify the defense tech ecosystem, talk about where it was, where it is today, and where it's going. Most on the panel require very little introduction, but I'll give them the mic here in a second. I'm joined by the Honorable Mike Dodd, Assistant Secretary of War for Critical Technologies and Acting Deputy Director at the Defense Innovation Unit. I'm also joined by, to his right, Adam Lackey, Chief Operating Officer at OneBrief, Delian Asparov, co-founder and president of Varda Space Industries and a partner at Founders Fund, and of course, Andy Lowry, CEO at Epirus. Gentlemen, I'm going to hand the mic over, give you a moment just for 1 to 2 minute introduction, your background, your organization, what you're working on today. This is perhaps, Andy, show and tell. I know you wanted to show, not tell, so we'll give you a chance here.
Easier to show what we do than tell sometimes, so I don't know where it'll go.
Jordan, if you have that.
So what you see here is 49 drones, and they all fall down. So what Epirus does is we are an electronic warfare company. I'm legacy Raytheon, and actually 10 years ago, I was coming to Fort Wayne maybe once a month or once a quarter because I ran the Raytheon electronic warfare group here, run by now I think a guy named Jeff Polamis. And so Raytheon has a big presence in electronic warfare, and there's no sort of not a coincidence that Epirus is leaning into Indiana as well. That drone shoot down you saw was done at Camp Attlebury. And I'll tell you why that's so significant. Because we went to 4 other states, and I'm not mentioning any names, but no one could help us out. No one could, but Indiana could. It was something that my wife told me when she worked for the American Red Cross. More blood is given by Illinois, Indiana, and the Midwest states to make up for the blood not given by California and other states like that. There is something authentic and real and can-do about Midwest. And I know I grew up in Illinois, not Indiana, I'm sorry, wrong state. But nevertheless, everything that I have done since I've been working with Indiana has been them pulling us in. And so it's no wonder why in the last panel they got chosen as the final sort of selection site. I feel it's very, very easy to work here, and I'm proud to be on this panel, and I'm proud to be here. And thank you, Senator Banks, and all of the folks that made this possible. Thank you.
Hi, yeah, thank you, Senator Banks, for having me here 4 years in a row now. My name is Delian, and I'm the co-founder of this company, Varda, that I started about 5 years ago. It was predicated in about 45 years of research on everything from the space station to the Skylab to the shuttle, showing that there were materials that could be processed up in space and have their performance significantly affected and improved when they were up there in that microgravity environment and could be brought back down. The issue was none of those materials really ever got commercialized because a government-run, human-rated research station is not a place to run a manufacturing facility. And so about 5 years ago, I started with this idea of, hey, now that Falcon 9 rockets are launching and landing all the time, why don't we make satellites that have basically small manufacturing facilities on board? And then unlike every other satellite, like a Starlink or a Planet Labs or a Maxar that communicate their value down to Earth using radio waves, we got to bring those materials actually back down. So uniquely, our satellites also have these small reentry pods that are optimized for coming down, landing on land, and being as cost-effective and as high cadence as possible. We started building that in 2021 and designing it. About 6 months into the company's life, the Chinese demonstrated the first ever operational Boost Glide hypersonic missile. It was not something that the United States had really sort of ever demonstrated. Mark Milley at the time came out and called it a Sputnik moment. And so we quickly realized that the exact same infrastructure and capability that we were building for our commercial business case to basically bring these products back down from space accurately, land in a tight landing zone, travel through Mach 25 on down, well, that looks a heck of a lot like a Boost Glide. And so I started working with a variety of different people to see how we could help the DoD with improved, sort of testing, regular hypersonic flights. Folks like Dr. Mark Lewis were incredibly helpful for us early on and have been, continuing to advise us. And so we sort of have this two-sided business where we produce pharmaceuticals for mid-market publicly traded biotech companies while we're up there. And then on the way down, we work with the Navy, Air Force, NASA, and a bunch of others to basically provide that type of reentry testing on the way down. And heck, we're starting to talk about rather than just testing, what if we, put some interesting things on board and drop those off on the way down?
Talk about dual use, right? Adam.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. Adam Lackey. I'm with OneBrief. If you don't know what OneBrief is, I mentioned a little bit yesterday, our purpose for OneBrief is to make commands superhuman. You can get on our website and see a little bit about what that software does and how it activates the mind. But the reason I'm up here is because I'm built in Indiana. First 22 years of my life I was here. I was educated here. I went to Indiana University, and then I spent 23 years in the U.S. Army. 8 combat deployments. I've lived in 5 different countries. I'm raising 4 children, but I'm a Hoosier first. And it's Hoosier values made me. So it's a real honor to be on the stage in front of all of you, and thank you for everything that you're doing for our nation. I'm back in Virginia now with OneBrief, and what we are trying to do is solve hard problems with software. And what we are delivering is what we see the customer needing. All right, our company is veteran founded from a point of need inside of Africa, inside of Syria, where we had our founder was a planner, and he was using very legacy office products to make really complicated decisions. So making a platform that facilitates superhuman decision cycles and then iterating on it is exactly what we do, and we love it. We've got a huge veteran base. Why am I in Indiana now? Because we've got a lot of Hoosiers on the team, and we will. I'm going to really be pushing to see more of those numbers in the near future. But remote-first companies are going to be important to Indiana as well. As we're not as represented in the chambers, but we're here, and we're contributing not only to your communities but to the global security of our nation. And so, again, thank you for being here. I'm looking forward to the conversation. Appreciate it.
Assistant Secretary Dodd.
No, thanks everybody for being here. And I kind of slot into the Secretary's, the President's Restore Warrior Ethos mantra. Nobody better than a retired Marine infantry officer to get in charge of fielding and deploying technology actually out to the hands of the warfighters. And the services, recognizing the services and the service members are our customers. My charter is pretty simple, and that is to actually cause our adversaries nightmares. And it's technologists that are up here on the panel and out here in the audience, and why I do a pretty aggressive roadshow is to find and meet those technologists so I can live up to my end of the bargain. And it's all good. I cleared that with my pastor. He's fine with me causing our adversaries nightmares. Absolutely. So, and you know, primarily here with the Defense Innovation Unit, kind of active role as the acting deputy director, Honorable Michael, who is the acting director, also the undersecretary for research and engineering. So we are kind of hand in glove in all of our efforts, and utilizing DIU as a tremendous partner and authorities and our funding lines to accomplish kind of the mission profile. But happy to be here.
Yeah, thanks, gentlemen. That's a great start. I kind of want to kick off with a little bit of a history lesson, right? I want to talk about today's emerging venture capital-backed defense innovation ecosystem. Where was it 10 years ago? And before we do that, just some context. So, you know, defense tech is the zeitgeist today. It's all the rage. Kids are recruiting for this for jobs out of college in a way they didn't 5 years ago because these jobs didn't exist 5 years ago. Right? It is everywhere. You are reading about it everywhere. Some facts and figures. Silicon Valley Defense Group pumps out a report every year called the NatSec 100. Included in this report is a ranking of the top 100 venture-backed defense tech startups. The 3 companies on stage were featured prominently in the top 50 this year, so congratulations. We start with 1,000 companies. Just think about that. Like, that didn't exist 5 years ago. It certainly didn't exist 10 years ago. Some numbers behind it. If you look at the top 100, over $70 billion in private capital has been invested in these dual-use companies and defense-focused startups alone. And increasingly, the government is spending on them. Over $30 billion has been invested in these companies from the government over their lifetime. Nobody thinks that gap is too small, but there is tremendous progress here, right? These companies have a median headcount of almost 300 now, which is plus 100 over 2 years ago. They have a physical footprint in 29 states. And government awards are up 8x since 2019, 20x if you exclude SpaceX from the data. And the government has, that's exactly right, and 2.3x over the prior year. This is happening. This is real. It's huge. It didn't exist 10 years ago. So let's reflect on that a little bit in that journey. Andy, Delian, you've been around for this transition. Really everyone on the stage has, but I'll start with you.
Yeah, like I said, 10 years ago, I was at Raytheon, and there was nothing called an OTA. There didn't exist. If you wanted to do startup defense and you weren't a billionaire, I mean, you know, nod to Palantir, nod to SpaceX, but a considerable of a lift to get there. But that all changed in the late 2017 when we began to look at the FAR and say this FAR was built for the wrong war, for the wrong time. We need to start changing it. Now, the changes were good, but they were like a toe in the pond, really. It gave rise to all of these industries, I think. It gave kind of the experiment, the ignition, but it's this administration that's going to actually make good with it. You know, because today I think only 1% of defense funding goes to these neoprimes and the new startups, something along that line. That's not enough. That's good rhetoric, that's good speaking, but it's not action yet. But now with this administration, everything we've heard and everything I'm seeing and witnessing, it's time for action. It's time to take a look at the FAR and re-update it again to say, in order to do it. Now, what we've seen, though, is just a surge of innovation. Innovation that is almost prevented by the bureaucracy, not by people. Everybody in the primes and everybody in the Pentagon are good people. But there's a bureaucracy that's taken hold that makes it almost impossible for innovation to get born by anybody other outside than the government. So you have government people that are informed, they know what they're doing, but they have single-minded thinking, right? Straight thinking, like this is one thinking. And you look at directed energy, which is our expertise, and that's a poster child example of that. You know, Albuquerque had been working on a form of directed energy for years and years and years, even though Raytheon and others were saying, hey, there's better ways. There's solid state. There's something called gallium nitride. We can look at this other method, but it was a talk to the hand, we're not interested. This isn't invented here. And so the not invented here mentality has been broken wide open now. If you come up now, fast forward to today, and innovation is all around us. But the question isn't about innovation just turning into kind of something you put on the shelf. And we were talking about this, Honorable Dodd and I were talking about this just last night. is that we've got a lot of innovation, but it resembles DARPA at this point in time, where you put a lot of that innovation on the shelf and you don't see it in the warfighter's hands. I see the next 2 years will be the real test to see if we can get this innovation into warfighters' hands. Thank you.
I think, so in addition to starting Varda, I'm also, a partner at Founders Fund, which has been involved in a lot of the, sort of great companies that have contributed into this ecosystem. And I think it's always helpful, to think about just how to frame the, sort of history of this ecosystem. And I'll give my, sort of rough analogy, which is, in 2005, if you wanted to build a defense aerospace, sort of company that, sort of worked with the DoD, you both had to be, a billionaire, Peter or Elon Musk. And you had to be willing to publicly sue your customer in order to convince them to actually, sort of work with your company. And so those guys really broke open the fold. Shyam got to witness, all that from back in the day. God bless that he stuck around. And then 10 years later, what does that mean? Well, thank God they've broken open the barriers. The floodgates are open. Now you don't have to be a billionaire that sues your customer. You just have to be a billionaire. And so they've lowered the bar a little bit. And so Palmer Luckey gets to start Anduril, and he does not have to sue his customer anymore. And he instead gets to build it.
How do you become a millionaire in defense?
Yeah, exactly.
Start as a billionaire.
Exactly. And then, 5 years later, there's a whole wave of new startups that, Founders Fund gets involved in. Varda, the one that I started, Impulse, Hadrian, a few others. Those, again, no longer a billionaire suing the government, no longer just a billionaire. We just had to be friends with billionaires. And so the bar had been slightly lowered. And now I'd like to say in 2025, hopefully with this new admin, with the Honorable Mike Dodd involved, et cetera, I think we're finally at the point where you no longer have to be a billionaire suing the government. You don't have to be a billionaire. You don't have to be friends with a billionaire. You just have to be friends of a billionaire.
Yeah, I think that's right, Dillian. And like the analysis that we pump out supports this, right? The numbers back it up. Yes, historically, it remains basis points of the total defense budget that is spent on innovative startups, but that's growing. Right, and that's going to continue to grow under, Honorable Dodd's leadership. So there is reason for optimism here. The top 100 companies on my list employ 70,000 plus people today. That is having an enormous impact on job growth, on upskilling, on local municipal economies. Adam, Honorable Dodd, any other further thoughts as you reflect on where the ecosystem was and where it's going?
What I'm hoping it's going towards is meritocracy. Because at the end of the day, what has been is, and we've been vendor locking and protecting ourselves in big industry, that's got to change. It's got to be the best for the warfighter now, not like in 6 months from now, not when this 5-year contract expires, but hey, what is the best software? What is the best weaponry? What is the best drone that we need to have on the battlefield tomorrow? And then how do we have the systems to make sure that we can get it there? And the caution I see right now is let's not replace bureaucracy with other bureaucracy. Right? We've got to be compliant. We have to be secure. CMMC is a net good thing, but CMMC, from a cyber perspective of compliance, has the ability to lock out small players who just don't have the ability for their teams to get compliant fast enough. So we have to be ever vigilant as companies like ours scale up and start to become leaders in the space. Being on these stages, we've got to be able to reach the hand down to where the merit exists and make sure that we can pull it up where it's needed.
Well, I think you guys teed this up really well for me because I'm committed to all of that. And my team is relentless about first principles and actually finding the best-in-class technology. And for my team to use our authorities and funding to field and deploy those in 24 months or less. Gone from my portfolio are open-ended contracts where program managers love to hang cleanse on them, and these are 4, 5, 6 year efforts. No identified transition partner, no off-taker on the other side. So it is a complete radical wire brushing of the organizations and the how we do business part. A very quick sea story. I was fortunate enough to fly in with Secretary of Navy on his aircraft yesterday, and we have a couple of interesting efforts with the Navy's Rapid Capabilities Office. So our thesis is I need the service, the resource sponsor, the Program Executives Office, the PAEs, all in alignment. So this technology that we are going to utilize DIU funding for actually goes somewhere. So no better hour spent with SecNav to say, hey, I got 3 projects that Navy RCO is interested in. Hey, sir, if you will POM for these, I will turn my team on and look to run a commercial solutions opening for those technologies and procure those on behalf of the Navy and then deliver those in 24 months or less. I can go back 4 weeks, similar, met with Sec Army, and who's got interest in the small modular reactor platform. Briefed him, got his commitment for offtake of the SMRs, and we're now doing a SMR project with the Army. So I commit to all that. Like, it has to be the true best-in-class technology. Again, having been a forward deployed guy, where you're always looking for standoff distance and lethality, that is my commitment to deliver it, and with technologists like the gents on the stage here.
Yeah, these are excellent points. As a follow-up from the other three panelists, what excites you a lot today about the appetite for reform that you're hearing from Honorable Dodd, right? Like, where are you finding centers of excellence that you're contracting with, and like, what is different about this moment?
Well, I think you heard it from him just now. It's a focusing on where are those innovations now that matter? Where are those innovations that have identified a home where they can be, trained and bought and maintained, and all of those different things you have to think about when you're really delivering a warfighter a capability. And, we talk a lot about the primes being the wrong method, and I heard even defense, like, look, they were incentivized to do this. Well, the primes do have something. They have mass, they have scale. And we're like super partnered with General Dynamics Land Systems right now. We've got a great partnership, and we look at what if scale were to hit, how fast can I build a factory? How fast can I staff up field service representatives to go out and train and assist the military to operate and maintain the system? Well, companies like GD and Raytheon and other primes, they have an active sort of workforce that we can partner with in order to get to scale. So there's a lot of motion. A lot of times we talk, okay, throw the glove down and say we've got to do this and divide it that way. But I think there's the actual details of it. There's a more harmony between the primes and the neo-primes that needs to be forged. And we shouldn't be looked at as enemies. We should look at cooperative, because after all, we're all after to defend the warfighter, get the warfighter the best technology and the best innovation in our hands to fight the best wars.
I think one of the, when I reflect on the last 5 years of VARTA, one of the times that I'm most impressed by our, sort of counterparties within the, sort of department was in like the middle stages, sort of the business, where traditionally, it had been called this sort of valley of death, where you get these early, sort of R&D contracts, but don't have a, sort of clear way to bridge through to, sort of program of record and, sort of consistent operations and funding. And in that, sort of interim period, there was this contract structure that had been created by the Air Force Research Laboratory, known as the STRAT-FI program, Strategic, Financing. The way that they align the program is it's effectively an expanded, sort of phase 3, where STRAT-FI will commit to, if you go out and find the end program office, right, the people that are actually going to transition, and the way that Honorable, sort of Dodd was mentioning, and you bring 15 million of basically end user funding, the Strategic Financing Office will match those users' dollars with an additional 15 million. So effectively that customer is getting like a doubling of their funds. But if and only if you also then, for that total 30 million, match it with 30 million of private, sort of venture capital funding. And so I found that contract structure incredibly unique, because it aligns the innovation office that is basically doubling the funding. It aligns the private venture capitalists, but makes sure that there is that, sort of end program office. And I think when I think back on the journey of VARTA, I'm not sure that end program office that we had landed with, and it was our initial, sort of end user, would have been as enthusiastic about the program if they didn't get effectively like a 1 to 4 on every sort of dollar they put in, because it allowed them to just buy way more product, way more services than the total amount of budget that they had on board. And so I've always sort of spoken about the fact that I hope that every single sort of branch and service starts to sort of think about that contract structure and creating that mechanism that through the contract actually enforces that alignment between the end user, the innovation office, and private venture capital dollars.
And there's a big trust component here too, because at Echelon, where we've got contracting officers, and the customer for the military, if you don't know this, is very broad. It's not a unified customer. So we've got services, we've got combatant commands, and there's different requirements. We've got National Guards. We have lots of things that need to be addressed in different markets, and contracting regulations and rules up and down. And so all of these things are very positive to answer your initial question. It's like, this is great. No better time to be doing this based on where President Trump, Secretary Hegseth, and others with the support of Congress and senators like Senator Banks and his team to be excited about where this is heading and going the right way. Now, how does that transition down to the trust of the contracting officer who's going to say, is it okay for me to do this? My boss wants me to buy this now and says go, but I've still got to wait for the downstream of the bureaucracy to update. Because updating at the top is great. It takes a little while for that to hit the road. What happens in that space? That's where we as business leaders need to be vocal and say, where are things getting clogged?
Just two quick adds. One, again, the way that we're kind of engaging the DIB and the industry, depending who we have coming in, like I bring my material leader, my acquisition team, and our full portfolio of contract vehicles. So as we try and iterate with the company, it's like, do we actually have a mechanism that is existing that we can lever to do business with this company, or would this be a new commercial solutions offering? And either are fine. And then I think the second, massive thing, and I haven't heard it mentioned yet today, is our engagement and collaboration with the Office of Strategic Capital. So for all of our non-traditional companies, we're trying to bring both private equity and venture capital to the edge and start to do preliminary due diligence as far in advance as possible. My commercial solutions team is working on a sprint right now where we can provide that level of due diligence on these non-traditionals. So the Office of Strategic Capital and the many funds that they work with get a sense of who the technologies are, who's in the cap table, who are the founders, and they're able to iterate and do their due diligence dramatically faster and less expensive. And then, OSC and the investors are looking to the department to say, what's the true market basket of that technology or of that company? Where are the on and off ramps? What's the scalability of these companies? And then bringing OSC and their portfolio of financial products and their authorities and their funding kind of to bear. So you're coming in with a complete mix of debt and equity so that these companies can win large contracts. 15-second high drift here. So I look to award a $5 million company with a $50 or $100 million contract. If they cannot demonstrate that financial capacity to perform, I can't award that contract. So having the PE, VC, and OSC activities in our capture efforts from the onset also critical. And that is certainly relatively new in the last several years, but now they've got their funding and authority online, massive differentiator kind of in the space.
I want to talk a little bit about your actual company. So you guys are doing really cool stuff. I think this is exciting for the audience. Andy, for example, you showed us that video, but that's not where you were a few years ago, right? Like, there's been a journey for you, a financial journey for the company to bring you to where you are today in your state of maturity. And so the question, I'll start with you, but then for everyone else is, can you tell me a little bit more about your differentiated tech, the use cases, where you're working with, who the customer is, and if you zoom out, what's a home run 1-2 years from now?
Yeah, so Epirus is into electronic warfare. We're an electronic warfare company, and we're focused on short-range air defense or critical point defense, which are different and very different. And so critical point defenses just don't hit it. SHORAD is the layered defense of overseas bases and protecting with various layers as you come in. So we're focused on those areas, and therefore we're focused on, most importantly, swarms. Because in that very close-in area, 5 kilometers and in, right now we're onesie, twosies, but not in the too far future, we're going to be 10s, 20s, 100s. And so we focus on swarms. Now, in order to do that, we came about an approach to a certain sort of an electronic warfare system that falls into the portfolio of directed energy, but is quite different than traditional directed energy. So similar to Next Generation Jammer, which is a Navy Air program, and by the way, I'm retired Navy, Adam, so we've got some Navy representation up here too. Although I'm working all with the Army today, so I gotta be kind to the Army.
I was Navy too, Andy, so.
What's that?
I was Navy as well, so
yeah,
we may have a majority on the stage.
And Senator Banks said go Navy over Air Force, so I don't know. I mean, it sounds like we got a pretty good Navy crowd here or whatever. Well, anyways, back to what I'm saying. Next Generation Jammer was a program that I architected, that I managed as a chief engineer of back at Raytheon, and that was one of the things I did at Fort Wayne here. Is the back-end common electronics unit was all a Fort Wayne derived and engineered back-end system. But the front end of the system, we looked at the old legacy ALQ-99. It was run by vacuum tubes. Vacuum tubes built and engineered basically when Silicon Valley was getting started, 1960s, And so we said, there's this new type of semiconductor called gallium nitride that can do better. Well, we look across the board at all then kind of vacuum tube and different sorts of TWT type applications. We found directed energy. Well, what can solid state do in directed energy? Well, solid state enables an ability to create what's called an active electronically scanned array or a phased array, where I can scan the beam very quickly, so I can create walls of energy. Because when you think about defending against a swarm, the first thing you have to do is figure out the way to do a one-to-many defense. The first thing, think about it, you're walking in the woods and bees come at you. You've got 10,000 bees at you. How do you do one-to-many defense? And then the second thing you do is you find where the bee's nest is and you kill the queen bee. And that's how you defend against modern warfare. We are totally foreign to that in our modern militaries. Our modern militaries are OODA loops, one effector, one threat, paired up, get the biggest, baddest, fastest type of systems, which we still have to deal with that war too. But this is an entire different domain. And it has its own ConOps, it's going to have its own doctrines, it's going to have its own way that all these swarms come at it. And EPRIS is sort of founded under the premise of going after that space and defending the warfighters against that very close-in space. In both the directed energy way that we have the Leonidas, which you saw it take down 49 drones at the same time, could take down 5,000 drones at the same time, 20,000. I don't need libraries. I don't need them to be remotely controlled. They could be fiber optic controlled. What it's doing is it's weaponizing electromagnetic interference. And it's totally different than the way directed energy has been approached up until EPRIS. And the only reason why it's here today for the warfighter is because some enterprising billionaires, aka Joe Lonsdale, said back in 2018, let's go for this. We think this is something really, really big, and today we have it. Today we're ready to scale. We have probably a 90% solution ready to go. We just need this administration to kind of put the afterburners on us, and I think in a couple more months or years, you're going to see these things fairly ubiquitously. And one last thing I'll say, 401, at least how they're talking, JIATA 401, which if you don't know what that is, it's a joint department across not just the Department of War, but FAA, all the different departments in order to expedite homeland defense against this emerging threat. And so, of course, we're very close to that team and that leadership team and General Ross, and we're working with them as well. So everywhere across the board, we're teed up very, very well. We're one of those success stories. JCO actually got us started way back 3 years ago under General Thurgood, was the one that actually selected EPRIS to move forward. So there were the mechanisms to bring us up and bring us to where we're at, and now we need to get to the warfighter. We're at that final stage, okay?
Adam Delian, just quickly, similar question. Differentiated tech use case today, where's your customer? What's a home run for your company in a year or two?
Yeah, in 2021, the Chinese demonstrated an operational Boost Glide. This is a system that was able to orbit the Earth effectively 3 times, come in and re-enter the atmosphere at Mach 25, stay below, the horizon. And this type of vehicle is something that, could cost between $100 to $200 million, but allows them to take out a multi-billion-dollar, sort of aircraft carrier. Ideally, we'd like to start to build, both offensive systems that replicate the Chinese capabilities, but as well as defensive capabilities against those. The issue is that environment, in that, sort of Mach 12 plus regime, is an incredibly complex environment. At those speeds, the vehicles are entering into the atmosphere with such high kinetic energy that they actually split the atoms of the atmosphere from one another, nitrogen and oxygen, highly ionize them, and you get that fourth state of matter. It's not solid, liquid, or gas, but it's a plasma. That combined with the speeds and the G-forces that you're experiencing, as well as the heat fluxes at those speeds, it's an incredibly difficult environment to model or really replicate at all on the ground. And so when I think about sort of home run for Varda over the course of the next couple of years, we flew our first demonstration, basically vehicle, last year and landed it. This year we're going to be doing that about 4 times. Next year 4. Year after that 7 to 12. When I think about sort of success case for us, it's starting to show that environment that we're transiting through regularly, we're able to go test out the systems that then transition into those operational interceptor and offensive sort of programs. When you think about an interceptor that wants to go catch a boost glide, it's got to be able to peer out of the plasma field that you're transiting into, identify the sort of Chinese adversarial system, and navigate towards it. That is a set of capabilities that the United States does not currently have, and the home run for Varda would be, working with those, end payload developers and systems developers to offer them very regular flight testing, so that in a couple of years we can actually demonstrate an operational hypersonic interceptor to take out a boost glide.
For one brief, it's about getting soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines out of the threat zone. Get the staffs away from the battlefield. That's how we measure success. All of the workflows that surround decision-making that don't have to be made at the edge, get it made in the rear. And we do that through collaborative software that works, that's there where they need it, when they need it, the way they need it, that iterates with them, because workflows evolve every single day with every single mission. But that's really it for us. One brief succeeds when that staff that today is 100 people can be 5 forward with the commander. We use AI to enable a lot of that. A good percentage of that comes off as we continue to iterate technologies, and we partner with other great software creators. Part of that is the evolution of the joint planning process, and all of the requirements that are in there for the taxpayer are dealt with more efficiency through the technology we have today. But it's a very exciting time to be able to say, hey, my kids, as they come into military age, if they're going to be in uniform, they need to be in uniform because we have to have them there, not because they're doing tasks that could be done from a place of safety. So that's what I'm passionate about.
I think for DIU and critical technologies writ large, our success metrics are peace through strength. So I would like to not be attacked in the next couple of years. And that where we know we are behind in certain technology domains, China is not a near-peer adversary. They are peer-to-peer and or have advanced technologies in several technology domains against the United States. Now, of course, we match and countermatch across all those. The however is leaping ahead in these technology domains where we are either behind or we are peer-to-peer to ensure that we continue to achieve peace through strength.
I want to shift to the future a little bit. So, zooming out and looking ahead, our ecosystem, the emerging venture capital-backed defense tech ecosystem, has been focused on innovation and innovation incubation. The companies are mature. We are ready for the next phase of evolution. As we look ahead, how do we strike a balance between continuing to encourage early stage incubation, but taking these companies in their current mature phase and handing that baton off to Wall Street, to the pools of capital that are going to actually be involved with production at scale? This is probably a question more for Honorable Dodd, given your background, and Deli, and wearing your Founders Fund hat.
Yes, I think we're doing a couple things. One, we'd love to aggregate capability of non-traditional performers who in some have a capability that is interesting to the department. So as a single entity or even one or two, that capability doesn't hit the output that we're looking for. The other thing we're trying to give to our non-traditionals is access, again, to not just the Office of Strategic Capital, but both private equity and VC, so they get an opportunity to strip out redundancies, give them access to directors, capital, financial products and services so they can scale. But again, earlier on. So getting those non-traditionals into we've got, between both orgs, I've got 16 different innovation hubs kind of across the country, but get them in, get due diligence done, get the institutional finance interested to connect with them and provide us scaling financial products and services as early on as possible. And then again, encouraging the aggregate teaming and capability of these performers so we can actually take a $5 million company and turn them into a $500 million company by putting them on contract and fielding and deploying the technology.
I think investors are ultimately almost always only convinced when they, sort of see the proof in the pudding. In some ways, you describe the, sort of founding days of SVDG as Silicon Valley finally recognizing that through a company like SpaceX, returns were possible. The public markets almost always, lag behind Silicon Valley by, about a decade or so, given it takes about a decade for our private companies to eventually, be large enough for the public markets to really, sort of recognize it. But I do think you're seeing over the past, sort of 18 to 24 months, driven effectively, by, sort of 3 companies, and all of those being not necessarily being driven by public institutions. When I think about, Sham and Palantir's, sort of stock price, it's mostly actually driven by retail, much more so than the public institutions, and those institutions now reacting to, sort of their continued performance and continued both, government and commercial growth. And then you have, Anduril and SpaceX in the private markets, but starting to actually bring on true public institutions and public equity holder, sort of capital onto their, sort of capitalization tables. You're starting to see that, sort of success and, sort of returns start to create a mindset shift, at least in the public institutions that I'm most familiar with. They're starting to, sort of transition some of their, aerospace and defense analysts to not just focusing on the primes, but starting to really think about this different track of neo-primes and how their fundamental, capital allocation just looks very different, right? The amount of, dollars spent on R&D, the contract structure, the margin structure, the likelihood of, a dual-use commercial application, all of those just look very fundamentally different, which just looks like a completely different, underwriting, revenue multiple, how you underwrite, sort of the growth of the basically dedicated analysts at a lot of these public institutions focus specifically on the category of like neo-primes effectively.
T. Rowe Price sits on our cap table, and it is invaluable as far as they're pointing us in the direction, because it's a different world and what VCs prioritize versus what the T. Rows and the Fidelity, a good thing for the community.
It does help that like the T. Rows, the D1s, the Fidelities, et cetera, a lot of those are actually starting to enter the private markets much earlier. So you're seeing a little bit of more of a, smoother handoff versus, sort of 10 years ago, that handoff effectively only happened at, sort of pre-IPO round and that was it. And sometimes that transition from private to public pretty rough. There's now, I think, a much, sort of smoother handoff, partially from private companies staying private for much longer, but then also these public institutions coming in much earlier.
And it's an issue if you're not dual use. Right, and so if you're not in the dual use space and you've got a gadget, look, there's a quarterly responsibility that you bring revenue in that doesn't match the procurement models. Even with, I would argue, even what we're talking about today, we've still got a lot of work to do. Then you add continuing resolutions into the mix and all these other things that are going to have impact on shareholders that are wicked problems, for people running these companies who are trying to provide, again, merit-based products to the government. So there's a lot of work to do.
Thanks, Adam. Venture capital is an accelerant to speed and scale. It enables maturity and access to, delivery way faster than if you were bootstrapping. And your companies now and the ecosystem that you operate in, you're on the precipice of the next phase of evolution. As we shift to innovation adoption and we shift to production at scale, just rapid fire with the last minute or two left here, what's attractive about the Midwest? What's attractive about Indiana? What is it that makes this, such an attractive place for shifting to production?
Well, I think for the department, I've got a physical footprint here. I've got great ecosystem partners here. It's really just the ability to, kind of hit the easy button and plug into my topic areas, my technology domains, and say, here's the problem I need to solve for, and let the ecosystem iterate and respond and help solve for. So it's just the ability to peer in for academics and all of our non-traditional performers here and actually get those technology solutions under review and vetted by the department.
Heck of a lot easier to build a factory in the Midwest rather than on the coast. And so, I think while the Rust Belt got emptied out over the, sort of, 1990 through 2015 timeframe, I think there's a reason why you're seeing a huge resurgence, and the fact that this, conference is growing so fast shows that there's, I think, a real return to opportunity here. And then on the coasts, it's pretty dire, and so that's why they're returning to socialism.
And oh yeah, it slipped right in there, I saw. On both coasts these days, right? Innovators. Silicon Valley was founded by Illinois and Indiana engineers that went out there with Shockley and his whole transistor idea years and years ago. So the innovation, the educational systems, Illinois, Purdue, Michigan, I mean, bar none, you know, and the numbers of engineers you can get in an institution like Illinois. You know, you take the top 5 or 6 engineering schools combined, and Illinois has more than them all together. So there's just a surplus of talent in the Midwest. And then, of course, like I opened with, the culture of the Midwest. I mean, I'm coming home to the culture, so it's just near and dear to my heart. But, you know, the authenticity is the word that I would use. You know what you're going to get. They're straight shooters, and they're going to help you out. So I love being in Indiana, and I love being in the Midwest. So I look forward to expanding beyond the shoot down and doing much more work with Camp Atterbury and Crane and the rest of the folks here in Indiana.
Be it people. That's all I would say to that. It's the people.
Gentlemen, this is an excellent conversation. Thank you. Happy Veterans Day. Thank you for what you're doing. You know, my organization has been tracking this emerging defense technology ecosystem for 10 years, and it has often felt like we're pushing a big boulder up a hill. I think that we're not going uphill anymore. I think we're flat and we're starting to go downhill, and I think it's in large part thanks to the work you're doing. If anyone's interested in continuing this conversation elsewhere, shameless pitch, follow the Silicon Valley Defense Group, reach out to me. I'm here the rest of the day. We'd love to bring your voice into our conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Follow through America. All the men who fell down in their planes and who lived through such hardship and pain for America, America. And the man who could not fight in a war that didn't seem right,
And everyone, we now have lunch served and ready in the back. We'll be reconvening at the end of a 40-minute lunch break. Please take the time to network with your peers, to take advantage of the booths in the hallway, and enjoy the great local brand we have for lunch, Chick-fil-A. Thank you.